Chapter 726 The Entrance of the Yin Energy Cave. This one is Ming Yuyi. Is Grandmaster Xiao Yunhai here? The divinely beautiful female said with a small smile. While her attitude was friendly, it was filled with great presence, and was difficult for people to resist. A serene voice seemed to come out of the black night. Grandmaster doesn't have the time, how about coming back after 3 days? Light rose at the horizon and the black of night was pushed back as dawn neared. However, Tsing Lianer was in a place that seemed to be a bottomless void. She stood with her long red dress touching the ground. Her presence was different from Ming Yuyi's strong presence, ethereal and hard to grasp. Kuai An's face was slightly burning. He was a martial yet at just first contact, he was intimidated by the other's presence. He felt embarrassed. I have heard long ago that Miss Tseng is a lady of a famous family. You are just as the rumors say. Ming Yuyi smiled. Her eyes and teeth were bright and she was stunning. Tsing Lianer smiled. I cannot compare to elder sister, below one person and above hundreds of thousands, power in your hands. With just a word, there are countless heroes willing to do your bidding. Ming Yuyi smiled. She turned and examined Qinghua Shui. A look flashed through her eyes. Are you Qinghua Shui? Qinghua Shui greets Elder Ming. Qinghua Shui bobbed slightly. The blue flower family did not have eyes, it is a pity. Ming Yuyi sighed lightly before staring at Qinghua Shui. I coincidentally lack an assistant. If you are willing, you can follow and work for me in the future. Qinghua Shui said composedly, Elder, many thanks for your attention. Qinghua Shui is of low ability and cannot accept such a great duty. You do not have good judgment. An old person of proud attitude said from beside Ming Yuyi. No wonder that the blue flower family has declined, you deserve it. Qinghua Shui smiled gently as though she did not hear this. Suddenly, a shadow flashed through the air. That old person felt his vision blur. Something suddenly appeared in front of him. Startled, he shouted angrily, You dare! The old man's hair spread in anger, the fingers on his right hand flickering. Numerous green lights shot out. At the same time, a glass-like layer of light protected him. Pew! When the green light hit the shadow, it immediately turned into fragments. The old person's expression changed drastically. Just as he wanted to move again, the shadow suddenly disappeared. He couldn't help but still. The next moment, the shadow suddenly came out of the air right in front of the green light shield. Before he could react, he had to watch as the shadow hit the light shield. Bam! A crisp cracking sound was like thunder in his ears. Power came at him like a mountain and he was sent flying dozens of zhang like a kite with its strings cut. Tsing Lianer's wrist turned and she withdrew her sleeve as though nothing had happened. She said serenely, Grandmaster is in seclusion, everyone, please be quieter. Kuai An's eyes widened disbelievingly. She actually darted to directly attack an elder of the Yao. Qinghua Shui stilled slightly. However, her expression remained the same and her mind was undisturbed. A deathly silence. Shen Power, another Yao elder's voice was deep and hoarse. He gazed hard at Tsing Lianer. The rumors say that Miss Tseng cultivates moon Shen Power which is hard to predict. You have broadened my view today. However, it is unexpected to us that Miss Tseng is so hostile to us. Tsing Lianer's smile bloomed like a flower. Have you come to drink tea? This Yao elder suddenly stopped breathing. Kuai seemed to wake up from his dream, his expression serious. He slowly took out his MO weapon, the blue horsefly, that Sui Mo had just forged. Ming Yuyi ignored the face-off and said meaningfully, no matter if it is Xiao Yunhai or Xiao Mo Gu, our goal is the angel device raiment. According to what I know, many people are also scheming for your Shen Power inheritances. Tsing Lianer smiled serenely and said, it will depend on whether they have the ability. That's true. Ming Yuyi did not argue. She suddenly reached out a hand. Several rays of light that appeared like seagrass suddenly grew from her palm and moved. Tsing Lianer's voice echoed in everyone's ears. I understand, you have already mastered Shen power. If Grandmaster is willing to sell Angel Device Raiment, we will guarantee Grandmaster's safety. We only need the Angel Device Raiment. Ming Yuyi glanced at her. Tsing Lianer brushed her bangs in front of her forehead and said softly. It probably isn't enough just based on the few of you. I dare to say this because I have some confidence. Ming Yuyi did not avoid Tsing Lianer's doubtful gaze. Her tone was not spirited, but it was filled with strong confidence that made people feel that she would be able to do it. Who can we not sell to? Tsing Lianer smiled. However, with Grandmaster's temper, the Pseudoshan device will not be cheap. Pseudoshan weapon. These three words clearly touched the nerves of the Yao elders. Their expressions were normal, but the changes in their gazes could not escape Tsing Lianer's gaze. Pseudoshan device, Shan device, there has to be a price. Ming Yuyi's expression was normal. Are you able to give a price on behalf of Grandmaster? No. Tsing Lianer smiled serenely. Then let Grandmaster give a price, Ming Yuyi said directly. Apologies, Grandmaster is in seclusion, and will take 3 days. Everyone, please come back after 3 days, Tsing Lianer said. 3 days? Ming Yuyi shook her head. We cannot wait so long. Then there is no other option. Tsing Lianer shook her head. A smile blossomed on Ming Yuyi's face. Then let us experience Miss Tsing's Moon Shan power. Elder Su, please. The deep-voiced elder nodded and slowly came out of the ranks. He said seriously, the Moon tribe was a famed tribe even in the ancient era, and the Moon Shan power they used stood at the peak. It is an honor to experience it today. Tsing Lianer was about to speak when a voice suddenly sounded, there is no need to trouble Miss Tseng, I will start. Quian held, blue horsefly. His cool face had a murderous expression. Zhuo Mo's movements were fast and he was but a shadow as he flew around. Rays of dazzling light flowed from his hands shooting into the ground. There were great demands for setting up such a complex Jinji. There were numerous seal scripts and MO matrices. Even Zhuo Mo had to focus all of his attention. If other people saw him now, they would be dumbstruck and gaping in shock. The ground was completely transformed and covered in seal scripts and MO matrices all over. The yin energy in the surroundings was starting to be affected, and occasionally would form small twisters. Zhuo Mo's expression was focused and he didn't dare to split his attention. He knew time was precious. The King's Forbidden Firmament was their greatest ace against those experts. The faster he could finish preparing this ace, the better it was. King's Forbidden Firmament was 500 li in diameter in the original design, but Zhuo Mo had compressed it to 50 li. This way, it would greatly increase its power, but the difficulty of setting it up would also increase dramatically. A fine sweat covered Zhuo Mo's forehead. But he didn't feel tired at all. His eyes flashed with a stunning light. The great pressure made him unprecedentedly focused. He was completely immersed, filled with bravery. He was in a trance. His thoughts were livelier than ever before, and his mind was clear as it never had been. His hand movements started to change, and the Jinji he set up gradually started to change. Too absorbed in his work, Zhuo Mo did not realize this. His hand movements were almost the same speed as his thoughts and like instinct. The Jinji started to form a preliminary shape. The yin energy was affected even more. Large amounts of yin energy flooded out from the deeper parts of the grave ghost mound and filled the area where Zhuo Mo was setting up the Jinji. Zhuo Mo perceptively noticed this, but at this time, all of his attention was on the Jinji. The first reaction in his mind was how to use the stunningly dense yin energy. His hand movement instinctively changed. More and more yin energy flooded out of the grave ghost mound. They came in a flow, one wave after another as though there was no end. The drastic increase in yin energy made Suemo even more excited. The thick yin energy was a power that could be used, and yin energy of such concentration was usually difficult to find. An imperceptible ripple formed deep in the grave ghost mound. Suemo did not detect it. Ague suddenly raised her head, purple energy flashed in her eyes as she silently disappeared into the yin energy. Ague flew about 20 li before stopping. There was a deep hole in the ground near her. The thick yin energy was pouring out from that place. The yin energy at this entrance was so thick it was almost inky black. The trembling of the ground was even more evident here. The shaking would coming in bursts every 10 breaths or so. Agui's eyes suddenly flashed with purple energy as she threw herself forward. A malicious ghost came out of the hole. Its body was shrouded in black smoke and was extremely difficult to detect in the thick yin energy. Ague suddenly appeared behind it. Her hand covered in purple energy entered the body of the malicious ghost. The inky black yin energy did not affect Ague at all. The malicious ghost froze where it was. The purple energy was like a fire that spread quickly along its body. In a flash, the malicious ghost was covered in the purple fire. The purple was ferocious and the malicious ghost wasn't even able to wail before it turned to ash. After being burned up, it left behind only an extremely pure strand of yin energy. Ague opened her mouth and inhaled. The yin energy burrowed into her body. Moments later, Ague opened her eyes, and the purple energy in her eyes was slightly brighter. Another malicious ghost came out of the yin energy. Ague repeated the process. Ague was like a ghost, her movements lightning fast. She wasn't affected by the yin energy at all. Usually, before the malicious ghosts detected anything, they would be attacked. Each malicious ghost would be burned by the undying Shen power to leave behind that thread of pure yin energy. Ague would absorb it. After consuming dozens of threads, the purple energy on Agui's hand gradually turned into purple flames. Just like before, Agui's body once again disappeared, and her hand covered in purple fire entered the yin energy. Yet the next moment, the purple fire in Agui's eyes flashed. Bam! A great power came from her hand. Agui's figure flashed, and she moved backward. Her eyes that flashed with purple fire was locked on the entrance. A burst of air swept away the yin energy at the entrance to reveal the true appearance of the incomer. Chapter 727, Ghost Soldier. A ghost soldier dressed in armor and shrouded by yin energy appeared at the cave entrance. Its empty eye sockets were filled with 2 balls of black flame. If Suemo was here, he would be surprised to find that this ghost soldier actually gave off faint Shen power ripples. The ghost soldier suddenly opened his mouth. Like a whale inhaling, the yin energy was sucked in. The black fire in its eye sockets more than doubled in size with a snap. The yin energy around the ghost soldier turned into thin wisps of black flame on its armor. To Ague, other than the black fire, the ghost soldier didn't seem to be any different than the ghosts before it. The purple fire in Agui's eyes jumped and her body suddenly disappeared from her spot. The black fire in the ghost soldier's eyes also jumped and its body also disappeared at the same time. Bam! A black and a purple hand hit in the air. The black and purple flames shot in all directions, but the two did not seem to detect it. Their hands continued to collide. Bam bam bam. It was only possible to see 2 shadows in the air, and light that would occasionally illuminate the environment. The black and purple flames were everywhere. Once it came into contact with something, it would be burned to ash. Such enormous noise finally disturbed Suemo, who had been in a trance. After focusing slightly, Suemo immediately understood the situation. At this time, the Jinji was more than halfway finished. He did not immediately interfere and observed in the shadows for a few moments. This ghost soldier was strong, and what Suemo hadn't expected was that it gave off evident Shen power. This was the reason that it had been able to fight a Gue for so long. The other reason was that while it looked wooden, it was experienced in combat. Zhuo was shocked and intimidated by many of its moves and reactions. It must have been a very powerful expert before its death. After observing for a few more moments, Zhuo understood even more. The ghost soldier was actually slightly weaker than a Gue. The reason that it was evenly matched with a Gue was because of its greater battle experience. However, a Gue who relied on her instincts to fight was not controlled by her emotions. In a short amount of time, she started to copy the other's fighting style. A Gue quickly gained the upper hand. Zhuo's curiosity was piqued by the Shen power vibrations of the ghost soldier. Its Shen power was filled with thick death energy. It was different from any Shen power that Zhuo had ever seen before. There wasn't any record of this Shen power on the gold leaf. A completely new kind of Shen power. Zhuo's mind moved. At present, he knew the value of a completely new kind of Shen power. His fingers flickered and numerous lights entered the ground. The ghost soldier that was gradually being suppressed by a Gue detected that it was losing and tried to turn and run into the cave. Suddenly, the surrounding yin energy became chaotic. The ghost soldier was surprised. The dense yin energy in the surroundings that he relied on for power, had turned chaotic without any warning. It panicked. For a Gue whose battle tactics had improved greatly, how could she pass on such a good opening? Her body flickered, and two images of a Gue suddenly appeared in front of the ghost soldier. The ghost soldier stilled. Suddenly, it felt a grip on its neck. Its vision blurred, and a hand covered in purple fire raised it up and smashed it hard against the ground. A Gue had used Shen power and the power of the strike was great. The ghost soldier's entire body was deeply embedded into the ground. The black fire in its eye sockets wavered from the smash. Before it could regain clarity and struggle to stand up, two fingers covered in purple flames pointed at the two balls of black fire in its eye sockets. The ghost soldier immediately became docile. That face covered in yin energy showed fear. Zhuo quickly appeared next to a Gue, crouched down and looked curiously at the ghost soldier. Zhuo had killed things like ghosts and fiends before but he hadn't studied them greatly. Even in the Xiuzhe world, Xiuzhe of this kind were rare. Because of the yin energy, they were not welcomed by other people. This ghost soldier's power was extraordinary to have been able to fight for so long against a Gue. Zhuo was even more curious about the Shen power it had. Zhuo's fingers flickered. Several streaks of light entered the ghost soldier. The ghost soldier's body froze and was unable to move. A Gue moved her hand away and stood at the side. The ghost soldier stared at Zhuo with unusual terror. Zhuo's presence was its bane. The Sun Shen power was the utmost yang and masculine, the natural enemy to ghosts that were born from yin energy. This was also why while this place was dense in yin energy, Zhuo didn't fear it at all. After a momentary inspection, Zhuo was slightly shocked. The Shen power the ghost soldier had was from before its death. Due to some reason, while it was dead, its Shen power had not completely dissipated, and been kept. This portion of Shen power that had been kept continued to merge with the yin energy to form a new kind of Shen power that had never appeared before. The ghost soldier's intelligence was not high and it fought based on instinct. Zhuo's mind moved and he turned to look at a Gue. A Gue's usually expressionless face showed a rare desire. In a moment, Zhuo understood. This kind of Shen power filled with the energy of death was very beneficial to a Gue. A Gue's Shen power was the undying Shen power, and came from the undying Shen punishment. While it was called undying, it originated from the same source as death although its expression was of the complete opposite. In the traditional understanding of death, death was the final destination but also the start. A beginning and ending, they were twins. The undying Shen punishment was to be forever unable to escape, an imprisonment that would be trap them in an endless, hopeless, and painful death. It was a death of the undying. The endless pain, suffering, hopelessness, those were the sources of the undying Shen power and also were powers that belonged to death. Yet if one could break free of the hopeless death, then it was undying life. Life forever needed to come from death. This was the foundation of the undying Shen seal. Suddenly, Zhuemo had a great understanding. Yet his emotions were complex. This path was dangerous, and multiple times harder than the system of traditional death. Life was forever harder than death. Zhuemo did not show his emotions. He moved to the side and left the ghost soldier to Agui. Agui did not hesitate. Her hand slapped down and the yin energy shrouding the ghost soldier immediately crumbled to expose the two purest balls of black fire. Agui opened her mouth and sucked in. The black fires were immediately sucked into Agui's mouth and the purple fire in Agui's eyes grew. Zhuemo immediately took Agui's hand for an inspection. What was being nurtured in Agui's body became slightly clearer. The pure Shen power that contained death energy was greatly beneficial for Agui. Zhuemo was slightly relieved. While he was curious what the cave held, time was tight, and this was not a good moment to explore under the ground. But this cave entrance that was continuously spewing out yin energy would give his Jinji great help. Agui was standing guard outside the entrance. She appeared like a hungry child. Zhuemo couldn't help but grin. He set up several Jinji near the entrance in case Agui encountered some danger. Who knew what else was inside the cavern? After setting this up, Zhuemo continued to set up his Jinji. The king's forbidden firmament, which was taking shape, started to give off an intimidating power. Kuai An's face was covered in wounds. His eyes were like two burning balls of flame. He gripped the blue horsefly tightly with its head pointed up. It's useless, Elder Su looked down expressionlessly. The crystal at his forehead was a pure blue and there seemed to be a faintly discernible ripple of a vast ocean, and the sound of waves coming from it. Elder Zu's Shen power was not strong but it had a presence as vast as that of an ocean. He raised his hand. The faint sound of the waves suddenly grew stronger like a storm forming above the ocean. Kuai An's vision blurred. He was suddenly surrounded by the angry waves of the ocean. Terrifying power came from all directions, pulling, twisting, and tearing. He had a hard time to keep his position. An ocean, it was truly an ocean. Kuai was shocked. This wasn't an Yao art. Shen technique. The two words exploded in Kuai An's mind. A light flashed through Tsing Lianer's eyes. The other was very strong but his Shen power wasn't pure. This was related to the path the other had taken. The merging of Shen power and Yao arts had formed a completely new kind of Shen technique. As expected of a member of the Yao Council of Elders, he was able to create such an unique Shen technique. It really was powerful. Yao arts were full of transformations to start with, and after Shen power was added, its flexibility was maintained while its power was dramatically increased. However, this new kind of Shen technique was not without its weaknesses. Its impurity was its greatest weakness. Tsing Lianer had cultivated Shen power for a long time, and knew that the purest Shen techniques did not have many complex transformations. Pure Shen power could make the simplest moves extremely powerful. However, this new kind of Shen technique was easier for Yao to learn. It was possible to see that the Yao had a breakthrough in the study of Shen power. If these people all cultivated Shen power, then there was great trouble. Tsing Lianer was secretly shocked. Looking at Kuai struggling in the Shen art, her eyes flashed with light and she was about to attack. Kuai suddenly shouted. The blue horsefly in his hand suddenly lit up. The serene blue light illuminated all of the ocean. Pew pew pew. Sharp bone spikes broke out of Kuai An's body. The bone spikes were about 5 cun long and the thickness of chopsticks. In a blink, bone spikes covered Kuai An's entire body. Then the bone spikes left Kuai An's body and floated around him. There was a point of white energy at the tip of every bone spike, so many that people's scalps prickled. Tsing Lianer's eyes flashed and she suppressed the urge to attack. Spear Hedgehog Emo Physique. She hadn't thought that Quian, who had a nondescript appearance, was one of the Spear Hedgehog clan. The Spear Hedgehogs were natural experts in spears and other polearm weapons. What they were most famous for was the Spear Hedgehog Emo Physique. One of the top Emo physiques that could use spear-type Emo skills to their true potential. And the blue horsefly in his hand was one of the top spear-type Emo weapons. Tsing Lianer's curiosity was immediately aroused. Whoosh! The blue horsefly flashed with blue light, suddenly exploded into tens of thousands of blue fragments. These blue energy fragments were like an enormous school of tiny blue fish that swam in the ocean. The terrifying power of the ocean did not pose any difficulty for them. In the opposite side of the fish, the bone spikes that floated around Quian gathered towards his hand at a rapid rate. A bone spike spear that was formed from the bone spikes appeared in Quian's hand. The ferocious waves and the great pressure that came from all directions could not stop this from forming. The moment that the bone spike spear formed, the deep blue school of fish suddenly stilled. Quian widened his eyes. He ignored the water around him, following his intuition, and made a textbook and perfect spear stab with a twist of his waist. Chapter 728, Threats. The young Emo god and the old man simultaneously stopped and turned to look in the direction of the grave ghost mound. It seems that someone wants to get there ahead of us, the old man shook his head and said. Let's go, our warm-up is finished. After fighting for so long, we cannot let the Yao come to the Emo territories and reap the benefits, the young Emo god said lazily. The old man shook his head rapidly. Your Emo-shan temple is great and bright, those old Yao have many people, only I am alone. Who are you trying to fool? You clearly are on the same side as Xiao Emo guest group. The young Emo god rolled his eyes. Are you in or out? Oh, alright, those that try to steal benefits ahead of others are the worst. The old man thought to himself for a moment and then immediately put on a murderous expression. The young Emo god clapped his hands and said righteously in agreement, exactly. The two immediately disappeared. The frightened people of Buzhou City sighed in relief, but then some of the experts who were sensitive immediately discovered the noise far away. Grave Ghost Mound. It's the Grave Ghost Mound. The crowd shifted. Some of the more daring people immediately flew into the sky towards the Grave Ghost Mound. The bone spike spear immediately created a great suction force like a whirlpool that gathered the blue fish-like energy fragments. Ripples radiated from the tip of the spear. The ripples had sharp thorny edges. The blue energy followed the ripples and gathered at the tip of the spear. The tip of the spear became so bright that people were unable to look directly at it. Those that saw the blue energy felt their soul shake. Hiss hiss hiss. A tsunami of hissing, each ripple with a frequency higher than the last. The blue energies seemed to be alive as they followed towards the lit-up spear point. Elder Zu's expression changed. His gaze was focused on that bit of blue light. Earth Emo weapon. The other actually wielded an Earth Emo weapon. Suddenly, he recalled that Xiao Emo Gu had also forged 4 Earth Emo weapons in addition to the Angel Device raiment. If this was in the past, the creation of new Earth Emo weapons would attract much attention. But for the Yao elders that had successfully reached the doorway to Shan power, they had unconsciously dismissed the value of the 4 Earth Emo weapons and set their sights on the pseudo-Shan device. Yet when they directly faced the soul-stealing bright blue energy, a strong feeling of danger rose. Elder Su suddenly woke up, an Earth Emo weapon was still enough to be a threat to him. His clothing swayed despite the lack of wind. Elder Zu's face suddenly flushed as though he was drunk. His hands pressed down, and his shout was like thunder, set. The ocean that had been full of ferocious waves suddenly became clear. The surface of the water was motionless crystal clear like a sapphire. Within the enormous jewel, that blue light moved unusually slow. The pressure coming from all directions increased dramatically. Kuai-yin almost suffocated. His strong emo physique was cracking under such pressure. He was experienced in battle, and had fought his way from the border of life and death innumerable times. He knew that this was the crucial moment. He unexpectedly closed his eyes, his mind completely serene. His right hand that gripped the bone spike spear now slid along the shaft to the end of the spear and then abruptly twisted. Snap! The bone spike spear suddenly exploded. The furiously spinning bone spikes were full of destructive power. Boom boom boom. The explosion of bone spikes tore a gap in the ocean water. A flow of blood came from Kuai-yin's mouth. He opened his eyes, which were unusually calm and bright. That bit of blue light had flown out through the opening created by the explosion. There was a thread of amusement at the corner of his mouth. Ever since he discovered the other cultivated Shen power, he had gambled on blue horsefly. What he gambled on was that the other had not cultivated Shen power for a long time. He gambled that blue horsefly was able to hurt the other. A dot of blue light flew out of the ocean water, and Elder Zu's face turned ashen white. Pressed, he also used his full power. Countless walls of water rose from the ocean to try to block this blue energy. However, this blue energy did not seem to be tangible and was not obstructed at all. The blue light flashed and arrived in front of Elder Su. Elder Zu's gaze met the blue light, and found a great suction come from the blue energy. He was unable to move, shocked and hopeless he shouted, "Save me!" Before he finished speaking, the blue energy pierced Elder Zu's forehead. Countless blue lights exploded from Elder Zu's head. Elder Zu's body melted like snow. Pop! Blue horsefly resumed its original appearance. Its light was dim and the body was covered in cracks. It fell from the sky and smashed to the ground into countless pieces. Kuai-yin also fell from the sky, his face paper white, and his breathing almost undetectable. A shout suddenly sounded in the air. A thread of fire suddenly flew out from the group of the Yao elders targeting the unconscious Kuai-yin. Snap! The thread of fire suddenly exploded midair. A long sleeve wrapped around Kuai-yin. Lianer's serene voice sounded in everyone's ears. "It's the first time I have seen an honored elder of the Yao this shameless. You dare! You girl!" An elder pointed at Lianer and shouted angry. Before he finished speaking, a crescent moon suddenly lit up behind his head. The crescent moon spun and his head separated from his body, and dropped down with a roll. Lianer said serenely, "You are so old, yet your temper is so fiery, why?" Lianer's attack came without any warning. Her attack intimidated all those present. Everyone felt a cold wind at their necks, and were shocked inside. Lianer's moves surpassed their imagination. Ever since they stepped into Shen power, everyone's power had grown immensely and all of them had been confident. They looked down on normal Sky Yao, marshals, and Fanshu. The only people they were wary of were the three Mo gods of the Mo Shen temple. Who would have thought that a marshal with an Earth Mo weapon would take Elder Zu's life? Lianer's moves were even more uncanny and unpredictable. Elder Wang had died where he was. None of them had confidence that they would be able to dodge this move. Ming Yu's expression was grave as her Shen power rippled. Her presence continued to rise. She was like a blinding sun in the sky, giving off light that no one could look directly at. Her eyes were frosty as she said coldly, "This is how Xiao Mo Gu treats his guests." Lianer's expression was composed but her heart sank slightly. That move just now had been a Shen technique she had comprehended not long ago. It was called the first moon strike. She saw the others' overbearing attitude and had wanted to intimidate them, so she had used this move. The first moon strike was powerful, but it also expended a great amount of Shen power. More than half of her Shen power was gone. What she had not expected was that while the other elders showed fear, Ming Yu did not have any fear at all. Tsing Lianer was surprised by the Shen power vibrations that Ming Yuyi gave off. It was much stronger than that Elder Su. If she was at full power, she was confident she would be a match, but right now, if she fought, her bluff would be exposed. Qinghua Shui had improved greatly, but hadn't cultivated Shen power. She was lacking too much compared to these elders, and could not help. Just as Tsing Lianer was becoming panicked, a cool voice sounded in the sky. "This is how I treat my guests." Ming Yuyi's pupils suddenly contracted. Just as the word sounded, a golden flame suddenly shot out of the ground and rapidly spread between Tsing Lianer and Ming Yuyi. A ruler-straight golden thread of fire was like a sharp knife that completely separated the two. "All those that cross the line will be killed." The cool voice was like a murderous autumn wind that blew into the hearts of the elders. Each of them felt a chill. Yet no one dared to take the words as a joke. This golden line of fire burned silently, yet the purity of the Shen power it contained shocked them. There was such pure Shen power in the world. Even Ming Yuyi stopped breathing for a moment. She was intimidated. Her expression changed slightly. She knew now that she had underestimated Xiao Mo Gu. The other's skill in Shen power far surpassed her predictions. In a moment, her expression recovered. Xiao Mo Gu was stronger than she had imagined, but she had the absolute advantage in terms of numbers. All of the elder around her cultivated Shen power. While each one individually was not as strong as Xiao Mo Gu, their collective power meant they had the upper hand. In a few moments, she considered the gains and losses. She secretly added Xiao Mo Gu's Shen power inheritance to their goals this time, other than the angel device raiment. If they could obtain Xiao Mo Gu's Shen power inheritance, she could completely perfect the Elder Council Shen power. "Xiao Mo Gu, you want to become enemies with the Council of Elders?" Ming Yuyi didn't give up an inch and asked in a cold voice. Behind the line of fire, it was completely silent. At some unknown time, Tsing Lianer and Qinghua Shui had disappeared. "Xiao Mo Gu, while you are of unknown origins, you must have the blood of a Yao." Ming Yuyi was not demotivated, her tone determined and firm. "Right now is the time of great change in the world. Don't you want to accomplish something? The Council of Elders desires those with skill, and you are one that we need. If you are willing to enter the Council of Elders, I am willing to give up my own position, and be your second in command. The Council of Elders has numerous core, resources, and people. The help they can give you is unimaginable. The faction that you have now will be completely in your command, and the Council of Elders will not interfere." The other elders heard this and all changed expression. Their gazes as they looked at Ming Yuyi were filled with shock and admiration. Inside the grave ghost mound, Swa Mo couldn't help but admire Ming Yuyi as well. This woman was strong. If this was any other person, they would be moved by hearing these conditions. The power of the Council of Elders was so enormous it could not be matched. All of the Yao were under its rule. The only one that might be comparable was Kunlun. Tian Huan and the others were lacking slightly, and as for the Mo that were divided under the rule of warlords, no one could compare. Clap clap clap. Clapping suddenly sounded inappropriate at this time. A handsome and upright youth slowly entered people's view. It was the young Mo god, Yoshi Yaku. He glanced at the line of fire on the ground, and his heart jumped. He did not show anything on his face except a lazy smile. "I have heard long ago that Miss Ming is a great woman and a rarity among the Yao. You are just as the rumors say. So great. However, how can us Mo endure you Yao coming to our territory and allow you to dig at our foundations? Are you Mo god Yoshi Yaku? It is an honor to meet you." A light flashed through Ming Yu's eyes as she elegantly gave a bow. "Ayaya, I would rather not meet such a powerful woman as you." Yoshi Yaku said impolitely and immediately caused anger to appear on the faces of the elders around Ming Yuyi. "Hey, Xiao Mo Gu, how about coming to the Mo Shen Temple? I'll give my position to you." Oh, right, our emotion temple doesn't have those rules, you can do whatever you want, come whenever you want. It is such a good place to waste away the time and wait for death, there's no other place like this. Qinghua Shui and Seng Lianer looked strangely at Sui Mo Qian, who had just woken up, gaped with shock on his face. Chapter 729, The Prologue to the Feast. Sui Mo was also slightly stunned but then became slightly smug. So GE was in such high demand. However, he wasn't the greenhorn GE from the past that had just started out in the world. His smugness did not show one bit on his face, and his tone was filled with conflict and agitation, as though he was making a greatly difficult choice. I need to consider this. Seng Lianer and Qinghua Shui looked at Sui Mo's strange expression. They heard this sincere voice and gaped. Actor. Definitely an actor. Qian's expression was puzzled. He didn't quite understand. There was nothing more that had to be said of the Council of Elders, and the Mo Shan Temple had leapt to become one of the factions in the Mo territories with the greatest potential. While it was unable to compare to the Council of Elders at present, the potential it displayed definitely would allow it to become a titan in the Mo territories. Invitations from 2 top factions, and he seemed to be joking around. Under Qian's stunned gaze, Sui Mo hurried to keep setting up the Jinji. If he had been anxious before, then Sui Mo was filled with confidence about the King's Forbidden Firmament, now. The King's Forbidden Firmament had such power just in its beginning form. He greatly anticipated the completed King's Forbidden Firmament. Golden Crow Camp had created something powerful. Thinking about that group of low-ranking forging Shouja who lived at the bottom and did not have any ambition to being able to create such powerful Jinji now, Sui Mo was filled with a sense of accomplishment. At this time, Mo Cloud Sea and Golden Crow Camp was extremely busy and moving at full speed. The battalions had finished assembling, and the atmosphere of Mo Cloud Sea was grave and murderous. An enormous Jia map was in front of them. Gong Sun Cha had a smile of a neighbor's boy on his face. In front of him, Shu Long, Ma Fan, Ajia Gu, Shi Dong, Wei Ran, Yi Ling, and others were gathered and sitting in a row. Any of these people if placed into another faction would be able to be a main commander, but here, they did not dare to even slack off. Each of them had the unique murderousness of a battle general on their face. Their orderly clothing and their stern expressions had become the unique traits for Mo Cloud Sea battle generals. Bihan only managed his Sin battalion, and the entire battle general system of Mo Cloud Sea was managed by Gong Sun Cha alone. Gong Sun Cha liked a clean style, and this influenced everyone under him. Even people like Lei Peng would carefully groom themselves when they went to see Gong Sun Cha. The astounding victories had caused Gong Sun Cha and Bihan's fame to grow. They had made their way into the top ranks of battle generals in the world. The commanders present either had been promoted by Gong Sun Cha, or taken hostage by him after being defeated. They in turn would not doubt his orders. It had been a long time since Mo Cloud Sea has made any big moves. Everyone's eyes burned with spirit. Other than Bihan, all of the battle generals were present. Just now, we have received information that Kuan Luan is participating in the fight over Xian Kong's territories. Gong Sun Cha said with a smile. Boom! The conference room shifted. Everyone had undisguised excitement on their faces. All of them understood what this meant. Darren. Let us also fight. Lei Peng, who always feared the world wasn't chaotic enough, was the first to jump out. The eyes of Shi Dong, who was famed for his calmness, flashed with a burning fighting spirit. He murmured to himself, a good chance. The conference room was heated and noisy. Gong Sun Cha did not stop them. He knew that these people had been anticipating this opportunity for a long time. 2 hours ago, Kuan Luan finally could not resist and started their attack against Xian Kong Temple. This was a strong signal, a signal that all of the 4 realms had been waiting. The feast to divide Xian Kong Temple had started. They had all been waiting for this signal. Everyone knew that Xian Kong Temple was weak now. There had been more skirmishes in the past while around Xian Kong Temple's borders than over the past 1,000 years. But Gong Sun Cha did not act. He had worked hard to plan out how to gain the most benefit out of this great feast. Looking at the excited group, his lips couldn't help but curve into a small smile. For some reason, he suddenly thought of Xixiang. How was Xixiang right now? He didn't know. If Xixiang was here right now, these problems would not even be problems. Gong Sun Cha dazed off. He always admired how Xixiang would be at ease dealing with any matter, and then show a smug expression off afterwards. He gathered his thoughts and his gaze once again focused on these strong commanders. He took a deep breath. No matter what, he had to help Xixiang construct a good foundation. A strong foundation that could help Xixiang complete what he wanted. Burning fighting spirit was like a flame that was suddenly ignited and burned crazily. It spread through his calm eyes. The commanders felt Lil Miss fighting spirit. The noisy conference room immediately quieted. All of their postures straightened, and looked hungrily at Gong Sun Cha for the orders. The plan has already been given to you. I believe that you have already read it over many times, so I won't go over it again. Gong Sun Cha's voice that was sharp and held a thread of craziness echoed in the conference room, and caused everyone's burning fighting spirit to become even more fanatical. This time, our target is 56 jie. They have all been marked. Not one more, not one less. Any faction that obstructs you is an enemy. No matter what you do, defeat them, massacre them, take them hostage. I only have one demand: speed. With the fastest possible speed, conquer the 56 jie. Gong Sun Cha almost shouted at the end. Yes, Darren. Everyone shouted in response. Golden Crow Cloud Island had never been so busy before. It was filled with people, all of the core members of Golden Crow Camp gathered together. Other than this core group, there were also many outer organizations that made their expansion so enormous. There were many outer organizations in Mo Cloud Sea. They were mostly led by one or two core members, and their composition were the normal strength Shouja that specialized in daily skills. Some simple talisman, Ling Dan and Ling food creation was done by these outer organizations. As Mo Cloud Sea's strength increased, the amount of items they needed also increased by an enormous amount. Golden Crow Camp alone was not enough, and so these outer organizations were born. The young people with outstanding talent had to pass through these outer organizations to increase their experience and master their respective field. Because experts taught spells and techniques, and they could find work easily in a relatively fair competitive environment, the number of these outer organizations increased drastically. Looking at the noisy crowd, the two masters' brows were tightly locked. Worry flashed across both pair of eyes. Compared to the well-trained and organized Golden Crow Camp, these outer organizations were almost unbearable to look at, with their chaotic management. Thinking about Gong Sun Cha Darren's astounding plan, the two masters felt the pressure increase greatly. Behind them, more than 1,000 treasure ships were floating in the air, creating a spectacular scene. These treasure ships had been gathered by collecting all of the treasure ships that the businesses in Mo Cloud Sea used for transportation. This time, they really made a great investment. Suddenly, a paper crane flew in front of Master Sun Bao. Master Sun Bao took the paper crane and read. An excited blush came onto his face. He handed the paper crane to Ji Wei. Ji Wei was also similarly excited. The Golden Crow Camp members that had been waiting below looked with wide eyes at the two. Master Sun Bao said gravely, "The battalions have already departed." Everyone's eyes lit up, and they shifted restlessly. Master Sun Bao used all of his strength to shout, his voice passing through the seal formations to every corner of the Cloud Island. "Everyone, take your teams, and board the treasure ships according to the order. We will follow behind the battalions. All of the Jinji forts that we build have their locations designated already. Once the battalions conquer the region, we need to use the fastest possible speed to set up Jinji forts. All of you, listen up. The fastest. Fastest. 169 Jinji Fort. Not one less. Get ready to board. We depart immediately. The crowd started to move, it was a stampede of bodies. Many people were floating outside the grave ghost mound. All of their gazes were focused that ruler straight golden line of fire on the ground. No one dared to cross it. Those with power could smell the strong scent of danger, and those even stronger were more astounded by the purity of the Shen power in the golden line. The news that the Yao Council of Elders had broken the secret of Shen power had been spread far and wide. The battle that had occurred just before had not escaped investigation. Shen power, this ancient and unfamiliar power, was like that ruler straight golden line of fire, it became a new dividing line. The difficulty of obtaining the secrets of Shen power could be imagined. But a martial level had an Earth MO weapon could threaten a Shen power expert. This was the information taken from the battle just now. Maybe it wasn't all Earth MO weapons, but Grandmaster Xiao Yunhai's Earth MO weapons had proven this. Blue Horsefly had been destroyed, the Yin clearly Chakrams had been exchanged, the value of the remaining 2 Earth MO weapons suddenly increased. For those marshals, the Angel Device Raiment wasn't something they could aspire to own. The only thing that could give them a feeling of safety were the last 2 MO weapons. In a flash, the last 2 Earth MO weapons were traded for. Ian looked at the 3 reverse shadow soul silkgrasses on his hands and was in a dilemma. The development of events had surpassed his imagination. Xiao Yunhai was actually Xiao Mo Gu. This unexpected result immediately caused him to end up on a train he could not get off. He didn't have the courage to swallow the 3 reverse shadow soul silkgrass. He wasn't so stupid to provoke such a terrifying enemy for just 3 reverse shadow soul silkgrasses. But Xiao Mo Gu's situation was terrible, and surrounded by enemies. No matter how powerful the Jinji was, Xiao Mo Gu could not stay inside for his entire life. Once he left, he would face a situation where he was surrounded and attacked on all sides unless he threw his lot into a powerful faction. The 3 strands of reverse shadow soul silkgrass immediately became a hot potato. If he gave them to Xiao Mo Gu, he would offend either the Mo Shen Temple or the Yao Council of Elders. If he didn't give them to Xiao Mo Gu, and if Xiao Mo Gu didn't die, then he could not afford the risk that the other would come back and settle his debts. Darren! Darren! His subordinate charged in with a pale face. Looking at his subordinate's expression, Ian's heart turned cold. Quian Darren used Blue Horsefly to kill a Yao elder. Quian Darren is heavily wounded, and Blue Horsefly was destroyed. The subordinate's voice was trembling. Ian felt his head ring. Great trouble. A long time later, Ian's expression recovered from ashen white. He gritted his teeth. Go. To the grave ghost mound. Since they had already offended the Yao Council of Elders greatly, and didn't have any relationship with the Mo Shen Temple, the only hope they had left was Xiao Mo Gu. Chapter 730, Silent Arrivals. Mo furiously continued to set down the Jinji, the light of spells on his hands flooding downwards. The complex Mo matrices and seal formations appeared on the ground with intimidating glows, blossoming and spread. In a trance, Mo threw everything happening on the outside to the back of his mind. His eyes were focused, and his mind was clear. All kinds of seal scripts and Mo matrices flashed across his mind, and then flew out of his fingers. The geography of the land, the river flows, the earth fire, the movement of the Yin energy, everything with 50 li was within his fingertips. Tseng Lianer woke up from her recovery meditation. While she had the sun seeds that Mo had given her, she couldn't bear to use them. Things that could be used to replenish Shen power were treasures among treasures right now. She raised her head to look at Mo in the sky with a serene expression. That figure gave off strong confidence. There was no pause or hesitation as he threw down the lights. Without realizing it, Tseng Lianer's gaze became even deeper. There seemed to be mist overlaid over her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking inside. Qinghua Shui's gaze was much simpler. Reverence and shock, but these feelings did not make her gaze heat up. It was still as serene as water. Kuai An's face was pale. He was the most shocked of the group. Xiao Mo Gu, Xiao Yunhai, these two identities were not secrets now. But even if he was seeing the spectacular scene in front of him with his own eyes, he could not reconcile the two completely different personages and identities as the same person. Suddenly, he shook from a chill. It was slightly cold. This unfamiliar feeling stunned him. Moments later, he reacted. He was heavily wounded, and his mo physique was weak. He couldn't help but glance behind him out of the corner of his eyes. His eyes suddenly widened. At some unknown time, it had started to snow. Gray snowflakes fell and the world was completely gray. This was. He opened his hand and a gray snowflake landed in his hand. The bone-aching cold caused him to shudder, but then the gray snowflake quickly melted on his palm. A pure strand of Yin energy dissipated in the air. Yin energy. Kuai An's gaze turned shocked as he suddenly turned his head to look closely at the figure in the sky, that person that was in his own world. He was able to make Yin energy into snowflakes. Kuai tried to quickly calm himself down. More puzzlement surged. It started to snow within a 50-li area, large patches of feathery gray snowflakes slowly fell down. These snowflakes, what was their use? Just as everyone was shocked by Zhuomo's uncanny moves, no one noticed that a Gui had disappeared. A Gui appeared at the entrance to the Yin Energy Cave, where the ghost soldier had appeared at. Beside her was the black gold seal soldier that had come out at an unknown time. He was using his metal fists to bang on his metal chest. The black gold seal soldier had an expression of bravery. A Gui, don't worry about those ghost soldiers, if one comes, he'll kill one, and then eat it. Noticing a Gui turning to look at him, his tone changed and he said fawningly, I mean I will kill one, and have a Gui eat one. After a Gui is full, I will just take some. When he finished, he hugged his stomach with a grieved expression. He looked pitifully at a Gui, tears welling up, Sister Agui, Lil Black is so hungry. Agui turned around, unaffected, and completely ignored him. Seeing that trying to be adorable was ineffective, the black gold seal soldier could only turn to face the cave entrance. He immediately became murderous, and hungry. The cowardly will die from hunger, the brave will die from overeating, in order to die from overeating. Pia, a bare foot stepped onto his back, throwing him off balance. The black gold seal soldier fell face first into the cave, and a string of wails came from the cavern. Agui jumped down. Experts gathered on a cloud outside the grave ghost mound. Marshal D looked at the grave ghost mound in the distance and said emotionally, this Xiao Mo Gu is really an influential person. No matter where he goes, he creates a storm. Qin Ming nodded and said, yes, but it is unwise to become known everywhere. A hero would not stand under a collapsing wall. The situation right now is not a dead end, but it is a closed one. It is difficult to resolve. Tang Chen grimaced hearing this, you really are all idle. Let's first think about how to obtain Shen power. The smile on the others' faces faded, and their expressions became serious. They had received news that the other two Mo gods of the Mo Shen temple were rushing over at full speed and would arrive tomorrow at the earliest. The Yao Council of Elders was another mountain in front of them, and this mountain was even bigger than the Mo Shen temple. They looked at the Yao elders, each of them didn't bear to tear their gazes away from the ruler straight line of fire. Ming Yu Ye's public announcement had revealed their aims for Xiao Mo guest Shen power inheritance. What is Xiao Mo Gu doing inside the grave ghost mound? Zhong Wentian asked. Qin Ming was thoughtful. Yes, what is he doing inside? Old Tang, what do you know about the grave ghost mound? Tang Chen shook his head. Not much. Qin Ming was slightly surprised. Everyone had fought together once and were familiar with each other's personalities. Tang Chen had left their group and returned to his family for familial reasons, but Qin Ming thought Tang Chen was a detail-minded and cautious person. This grave ghost mound was just a few hundred li from Buzhou City. It was so close that he was shocked that Tang Chen did not know it well. Tang Chen grimaced. It is not that I do not want to know, but this place is slightly strange. Strange? Everyone's attention was attracted. A place that a marshal called strange was most likely a bit strange. I've sent many people to explore the area, but not many have returned. I eventually made a trip personally. Tang Chen's expression was grave. The yin energy inside is extremely dense with soul fiends and malicious ghosts. As I went deeper, the yin energy increased in concentration, and would suddenly boil. If one doesn't personally experience it, it is difficult to imagine the scene. All the yin energy in the surroundings would boil at the same time. If you use MO skills in the slightest, it would cause the yin energy to explode. I almost didn't make out that time. When he spoke of this, Tang Chen had an expression of fear. Everyone looked at each other with shocked expressions. Is there someone else powerful living in hiding here? Qin Ming couldn't resist asking. Tang Chen shook his head. I don't know, but ever since that time, I never went there again. I didn't expect that Xiao Mo Gu would run in, and I don't know what he is doing inside. At this time, a strong wave of vibrations came from the grave ghost mound. Everyone was startled and hurriedly turned. The grave ghost mound seemed to turn alive, the mountains and rivers moving. The rumbling could be heard from a distance, and the dark red earth fire formed pillars of fire. Even stranger was that the sky above the grave ghost mound was filled with gray snowflakes. A vibration that was hard to describe flashed across everyone's minds. The main peak of Xian Kong Temple looked the same as before, but the fear and alarm on the faces of the disciples could not be disguised. The complete destruction of the Elder Core was a fatal blow to Xian Kong Temple. If the world was not in chaos, they could enact a policy of isolation for decades, and Xian Kong Temple might be able to recover. But right now, the world was in turmoil, and the balance between factions was changing. People saw the weakness of Xian Kong Temple. There were continuous skirmishes at the borders of Xian Kong Temple and all kinds of conflicts were escalating in intensity. Those factions were like cunning wolves that were tearing off flesh from the enormous body of Xian Kong Temple. All of the Xian Kong Temple disciples realized that the sect was at the time of life and death. Kunlun has entered the fight. When the news came back, all of them had ashen expression. They all knew what this meant. The participation of Kunlun would be the straw that broke the camel's back, figuratively speaking. In reality, Kunlun was not a straw but a great mountain. As expected, on the afternoon of that day, Tian Huan who had maintained their control took over 4 jia of Xian Kong Temple at lightning speed. Kunlun, Tian Huan, these two former allies of Xian Kong Temple showed their bright butcher knives. All of the factions understood that the climax of the feast was about to arrive. Almost all the factions moved at the same time, their eyes red as they furiously attacked. The fighting was intense and ferocious. At the moment of life and death, many of the Xian Kong Temple battalions had the thought of dragging their enemies into death with them. There were battles to the death everywhere. Their fierce and hopeless counterattack exploded. It displayed Xian Kong Temple's thousands of years' worth of foundation and bravery, but also showed its weakness and lack of future. At the main peak right now, there were only the disciples that were in charge of chores. Any disciple with fighting ability had been sent to the front lines to stop the attacks of the enemy. People were afraid. Any disciple with any knowledge knew that the present dilemma of Xian Kong Temple would not be resolved even if there were a few more Fanshu experts. When the entire world came to divide Xian Kong Temple, it was fated for this sect that was thousands of years old to die. No one could stop the entire world, not even Kunlun. Once the situation formed, the momentum had given their fate a life of its own. The participation of Kunlun and Tian Huan extinguished the last bit of hope in the hearts of the Xian Kong Temple disciples. What was most fatal was that they hadn't thought that Kunlun and Tian Huan would be so impatient. These two fatal butcher knives came so quickly. Ming Xin's mood was terrible. He did not want to die with the sect. The best choice right now was to follow another leader. Other than Xian Kong Temple, Xian Kong Realm had 9 other great temples, and they were all good choices. However, it was not possible to go throw himself with another sect with empty hands at this time. He thought of the Sutra Pavilion and the Dhyana Treasure Pavilion. A daring idea was unable to be suppressed. A harsh look flashed through his eyes. He needed to be fast. There probably were many that had the same idea. If he could get 1 or 2 treasures, he would naturally have a place to live in the future. After arriving at the decision, Ming Xian did not hesitate. Taking advantage of the dark, he sneaked to the Sutra Pavilion. The Sutra Pavilion was unusually silent today. A hint of anxiousness flashed across Ming Xin's mind. But he gritted his teeth and sneaked in. Usually, the Shishu would guard this place, but they had all been summoned away. There were only Jinji left, but he was familiar with them. Carefully avoiding the Jinji, he finally entered the Sutra Pavilion and was extremely excited. But when he saw what was in front of him, he was struck dumb. Chapter 731, The night was as dark as ink, thick clouds blocking the sun, and one couldn't even see their fingers. There was a blurry figure at the highest point on the main mountain peak of Xian Kong Temple. The mountain wind was strong, and caused Bihan's cape to flap loudly in the wind. His frosty and cold face held a complex expression. He was familiar with every blade of grass and every tree here. In this place, he had grown up, learned to be a battle general, was held captive, and was humiliated. He was filled with hatred for this place. Countless times in his dreams, he had personally lit a great fire and burned this damned place into ash. But when this day truly arrived, when he stepped onto the main peak again, when the scene of his dreams was about to be realized, he didn't feel that pleasure at getting his revenge but an indescribable mix of feelings as he stared at the dark night and this familiar place. No one could save Xian Kong Temple. Even if Jiang Zhe came back from the dead, he would not be able to save Xian Kong Temple. Bihan and Gongsun Cha had both felt that Kunlun would soon make their move, and a daring plan had appeared. Gongsun Cha's sharpness and insanity combined with Bihan's fiery tactics caused this plan to receive full support. Bihan led Sin Battalion and sneaked through the night to get close to the main peak without being detected. Almost all of the forces of Xian Kong Temple were positioned on their borders to resist the invasion of other forces. Their center was left comparatively empty and undefended. For Bihan, who had lived in Xian Kong Temple since his childhood, it was though there were no defenses at all. Once Kunlun entered the battle, all of Xian Kong Temple would panic, and this was also when Xian Kong Temple's main peak defenses would be at its weakest. Bihan, who had been hiding nearby, unhesitatingly bared his fangs. Bihan, who was familiar with every tree and flower, didn't even give the disciples of Xian Kong Temple any chance to send a message before taking down all of Xian Kong Temple's main peak. There wasn't anything left alive on the main peak of Xian Kong Temple. Bihan's gaze cleared quickly of its daze and became cold again. He looked up at the sky and knew he could not afford to delay. He was not the only one that was hiding in the dark. The Sutra Pavilion and Dhyana Treasure Pavilion of Xian Kong Temple's main peak held the wealth of Xian Kong Temple accumulated through thousands of years. It was the most tempting and delicious part of this feast. The situation had developed so quickly that Xian Kong Temple hadn't had the time to move this wealth away. All of the sects were targeting this fat piece of meat. Among the Xian Kong Temple disciples that he had just killed, there were 6 that were spies from other factions. Soon, the elite experts of other factions would arrive and it would not be so easy to leave then. Bi-Han looked deeply at this Diana holy ground that had stood for thousands of years. A jade box covered in seal scripts appeared on his hand. He did not hesitate and threw the jade box out. The jade box drew out a curve as it flew through the night sky, bam, and landed halfway up the mountain. The jade box immediately cracked. A dot of fire lit up from the jade box. The fire quickly spread at a mad speed towards the surroundings. In a flash, the middle of the mountain was covered in flames. The dark red flames danced furiously and consumed everything. This was a work from the two masters of Golden Crow Camp. Samadhi Fire Box. This kind of 6th grade fire was stunningly power. Harvesting high-level fires from fire formations was one of Golden Crow Camp's best skills. The flames of the core members in Golden Crow Camp had all been upgraded a long time ago. 4th grade Golden Crow fire was too low grade for their present needs. Many sects had Samadhi fire and using it here would not expose their identity. In a flash, the flames consumed the entire peak. The crimson-red tongues of fire shot up and licked the sky. The entire sky was dyed red, and even the clouds were unable to the lashing tongues of flame. The sky was penetrated by the hot flows of air. Among the flames, Bi-Han led the silent and puppet-like Sin battalion to a soundless withdrawal. The Yin energy underground was thick and a passageway stretched forward. The concentration of Yin energy inside the cave was multiple times that of above. Waves of Yin energy came out of the deep hole. The black gold seal soldier's eyes flashed with eerie light. He banged on his chest as he comforted Ague, shamelessly complimenting himself, "Sister Ague, don't worry, Lil Black is very strong now, and can easily capture those ghost soldiers." He suddenly stopped and his eyes lit up. Ague silently stopped walking. Suddenly, the black gold seal soldier gave a sly smile and his body smashed towards the right abruptly. Bam! His smash was extremely strong and something immediately flew out. The black gold seal soldier's hands and feet were on the ground like a wild beast as he shouted out. He stretched out his neck, his face twisted as he howled at the top of his lungs, "Oh oh oh," singing to the sky with a curved neck. He was lightning fast and didn't even leave behind an afterimage in the air. Whoosh, he appeared behind that thing. Bam, his right leg was like a whip that viciously struck the gray shadow. The great power whipped the gray shadow into the air. The black gold seal soldier's eyes were bright as he shot out again. He suddenly appeared in the air, meeting the incoming gray shadow and struck another blow with his leg. Bam bam bam. There was a fast rattle of bone-aching sound that would cause people's scalps to prickle. Suddenly, his figure flashed again and he appeared next to the gray shadow. His right hand was like metal pincers that clasped around the thing's neck. The series of movements had been lightning fast. The black gold seal soldier gripped the other's throat and pulled it in front of him. After examining it for a while, he was slightly puzzled. This is the ghost soldier. The flames in the eyes of the ghost soldier were dim as though it had been greatly affected by the storm of attacks and hadn't recovered yet. The bones of the ghost soldier were covered in cracks and it was breathing faintly. Suddenly, the black gold seal soldier's nose jerked and his eyes lit up. Shen power. But his face quickly fell. He dragged the ghost soldier in front of Ague and said reluctantly, "Sister Ague, here." Ague quickly sucked all of the Shen power from the ghost soldier's body. The black gold seal soldier's power had grown greatly after he swallowed 2 balls of light while Zwaymo had forged the Earth Mo weapons. He rampaged around underground. All of the ghost soldiers that he met were unable to fight back. The two advanced more than a dozen li and killed 6 ghost soldiers. Ague absorbed 3 threads of Shen power and the black gold seal soldier also absorbed 3. After absorbing the threads of Shen power, the black gold seal soldier became even more powerful. He was also able to automatically take in Yin energy from the surroundings and could hide perfectly in it. After absorbing Shen power, the purple fire in her eyes was brighter. The Yin energy in the surroundings continuously flowed into her body and then permeated out of her body. The Yin energy that came out would carry away threads of black energy. The black gold seal soldier suddenly exclaimed in shock, "Sister Egue, you seem to have become more beautiful." "That's great. I have to ask for a reward from Big Bro. If I don't ask for a reward for such a good thing, I really can't live up to my name." The scars on Egui's face were much fainter and her exposed skin much smoother. What was most attractive was still her perfect pair of feet. Her bare feet at present had an additional luster like that of jade or porcelain. They were untouched by dust despite stepping on the ground. The black gold seal soldier touched his face and then his head. He muttered, "Why didn't I become more handsome? It's not fair, this really isn't fair. Ahaha, I want to become handsome. I want to become the handsomest seal soldier, and then pursue the tastiest ling beasts." The black gold seal soldier's wails echoed underground. The purple fire in Egui's eyes became less heated and more gentle. "I really lost out. I have to get something out of Big Bro to comfort my wounded soul." The black gold seal soldier's mouth constantly ran. Suddenly, his gaze met his own hand and he stilled. N. The script on his hand was peerlessly clear. This pattern was very powerful. It was not like a seal script, nor a MO matrix, it seemed extremely old. Even Big Brother was unable to tell what it was. In the past, it had been very blurry, but now it was extremely clear. Each stroke was clear. However, he clearly remembered that this pattern didn't have any black parts. One line of the pattern on his hand had turned black. He inspected it a few times and couldn't make heads or tails of it. He could only give up. However, he immediately became excited. This hand's pattern had always been his strongest killing move. While he didn't understand what pattern this was, he could feel the great power contained in the hand pattern. "Have a strong one come. Have a strong one come. Let GE try this out." The black gold seal soldier yearned to try. At this time, deep in the cavern, a deep growl came. The Yin energy in the cave suddenly became ferocious and turbulent as it twisted and headed at the duo. The black gold seal soldier was aching for a fight and was overjoyed. He changed forward into the furious wave, heading in headfirst like an arrow. The purple fire in Egui's eyes suddenly lit up. The wave of air blew away the sand and rocks around her, yet Egui didn't move at all. Egui's bare feet lightly danced on the ground before she disappeared. Bam bam bam. Loud sounds of collisions entered Egui's ears. When Egui arrived, she only saw the black gold seal soldier fighting intensely against a skeleton covered in flames. The air vibrated with the exclamations of the black gold seal soldier and the angry howls of the fire skeleton. If Mo was here, he would definitely recognize that it was a sacrificial altar under the black gold seal soldier and the fire skeleton. At the edge of the sacrificial altar, there were 10 totem pillars carved with ghosts and monsters. They were continuously spouting pure and thick Yin energy out. The Yin energy followed the passages of the sacrificial altar to gather at a bulge at the center. The Yin energy climbed up the steps. There were 4 stone statues with grotesque fasts and fangs guarding the 4 corners of the platform. The statue on the west was already shattered to leave behind a pile of rubble. From the fragments, it was possible to see that this was a statue of a skeleton. At the center of the statues where the Yin energy gathered, a gray set of armor stood silently. The feet of the armor continuously absorbed Yin energy that was then spat out through its mouth. All of the Yin energy underground came from here. The bone armor was like jade. After being permeated for countless years by the Yin energy, it was astoundingly fine to touch. Small pieces of bones were layered together and held in unique beauty. The empty eyes of the bone armor carried the weight of the ages as they soundlessly stared at a Goe. 1. The black gold seal soldier mangled the poem The Song of the Goose. The proper translation is more along the lines of, goose, 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 she is singing towards the sky, with her neck bending in such a lovely curve, from Chapter 732, King's Forbidden Firmament. He is setting up Jinji, the chief Mo god said coolly. The rhinoceros Mo god stood silently next to him. The two did not have any attendants with them. After changing their appearance, no one recognized them. Having disguised themselves and ordering subordinates to act as body doubles to mislead their enemies, no one knew that they had secretly arrived. I already told Third to delay the old man and the Yao Council of Elders when we make our move, the rhinoceros Mo god said gravely. We need to be fast and capture Xiao Mo Go before they can react. The chief Mo god's eyes were cold. The angel device raiment is definitely on him. As long as Xiao Mo Go is in our hands, we have the upper hand. The rhinoceros Mo god nodded. He glanced at the grave ghost mound. I will break the Jinji. His voice was hushed but his tone was filled with confidence. In his view, Xiao Mo Ge's idea of setting up Jinji was laughable. The Jinji might be strong, but it definitely could not stop them. Only Shen Power Jinji could stop Shen Power experts. Tseng Liana's Shen Power has not yet recovered, and she is not a threat, the chief Mo god schemed, Xiao Mo Go is setting up Jinji and has definitely used a great amount of energy. The only worry is that ugly servant of his. The rhinoceros listened silently with a composed expression. Do not hold anything back. The chief Mo god's gaze did not leave the grave ghost mound. This battle will determine the future of our Mo Shen temple. If we succeed, we will not need to fear the Yao Council of Elders. I know, the rhinoceros Mo god said gravely. Act now. Before the words finished, the chief Mo god's figure disappeared. The figure of the rhinoceros Mo god flashed and he silently appeared high above the periphery of the grave ghost mound. He took a deep breath. All the Shen power in his body vibrated. He knew that with this attack, his identity would be exposed to everyone. Victory and defeat was all in this blow. He eliminated the stray thoughts in his mind, his hands slowly raised up high, and his eyes widened. Boom! A stunning presence erupted like a volcano, and was no longer concealed. It was as bright as the sun. The powerful Shen presence spread across all of the grave ghost mound and the surrounding 100 li like a storm. The suffocating presence was like a roaring wasteland beast from the ancient era. Those Mo of average power felt their legs weaken and almost give out. Blood-red hoops suddenly wrapped around the right arm of the rhinoceros Mo god. The rhinoceros Mo god opened his eyes, the 5 fingers on his right hand spread out as he pressed his open palm downwards. The yin energy that multiplied suddenly in ferocity had nearly caught Swa Mo off guard. However, his reaction was fast and he immediately adjusted, his hand movements changing. The yin energy was like a coiling grey dragon that silently moved along the Mo matrices and seal scripts already set up. Everywhere it passed, the Mo matrices and seal scripts lit up. The yin energy was absorbed by the Mo matrices and seal scripts and then turned into grey snowflakes. The snow grew even heavier. Even someone as strong as Swa Mo couldn't help but show weariness after setting up Jinji for such a long time. He threw a sun seed into his mouth and felt as the pure Shen power continuously rejuvenated his body. When his strength returned, the light in his eyes grew brighter. Looking at the mountains, rivers, and flowing earth fire within 50 li and the packed seal scripts and Mo matrices, a smug expression appeared on his face. Gu is really a genius. However, he would only know the effect of the Jinji after activating them. The strange and heavy grey snow had already been noticed by the experts gathered outside. Numerous pairs of eyes focused on the grave ghost mound behind the line of fire. Swa Mo took a deep breath. He looked down at the Jinji below and his eyes flashed with a stunning light. Since this was the case, then let it be activated. At the sudden appearance of the rhinoceros Mo god, the old man, Ming Yuyi and the other people all changed expression. The old man's hair flew up as his Shen power reached a peak. His body was covered in a layer of terrifying black light, his muscles bulging. He suddenly grew in height, his figure multiplying in size, his body seemingly made from metal as it turned black. He stepped forward, his back arched as he threw a punch layered in black light at the rhinoceros Mo god in the sky. He shouted thunderously, "Get down here." A cold light flashed through Ming Yuyi's eyes. The light blue reeds in her hand danced at an unique rhythm and snapped. A blue butterfly flew out. Its beautiful wings flapped in the air and it disappeared. "Old elder, you really have a temper." The young Mo god giggled. Yet there was no humor on his face, only a stern expression at the gravity of the situation. The bloody light on his body was thick, and his Shen power was clearly being channeled to its limits. Within the bloody light, thorny vines flew out. The bloody vines danced in the air like snakes with thorns. They crisscrossed in the air and covered the sky. Dozens of blood vines twisted eerily as they gathered in one direction. They immediately formed a wall of vines that blocked the punch from the old man. Boom! The blood vine wall immediately was penetrated. The young Mo god seemed to have expected this. A second and a third vine wall appeared at almost the same time. The punch passed through the second blood vine wall, and smashed into the third, but it was halted. At the same time, the blood vines suddenly bloomed with bright flowers. The flowers withered at a visible rate, the petals falling and dancing in the wind to form a mist surrounding the figure of the blue butterfly. The blue butterfly lightly flapped its wings. The bright blood mist was unable to move forward. Yet the blood mist thickened and surrounded the blue butterfly. Pop pop pop. A rattle of explosions came from within the bloody mist and, abruptly, the bloody mist exploded. Ming Yuyi's expression changed slightly. She unhesitatingly cut off her connection to the butterfly. The blood mist in the air exploded, a ring of bloody light spreading ferociously into the surroundings like a storm. All of the people who had approached were caught off guard and were thrown into the air as though they were hit by a rampaging bull. Eerie blood-colored patterns suddenly appeared on the face of the young Mo god. Blood seeped out of these beautiful patterns. He looked both eerie and terrifying. His face was pale, his clothing tattered, and his figure wavering and about to fall. He had managed to stop these two users of Shen power, but it had cost him greatly. Ayaya, being cannon fodder isn't a great feeling. He muttered to himself as his thin body floated weakly in the air. At the same time, a stunning yet familiar wave of air came towards his back. An accomplished smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Of the three, the chief Mo god was the strongest, but in terms of how domineering one's power was, the rhinoceros Mo god was the best. Nothing could stand to the Mo god's brute hand. He had completed his mission. The young Mo god seemed relieved of a great burden. He relaxed his body and allowed it to drift with the furious flow shockwaves power like a falling leaf. He did not care about the blood that was seeping out of the patterns on his face. Yet his relaxed body suddenly froze. In the next moment, the young Mo god forcibly twisted his body and turned back to gaze at the grave ghost mound. His eyes widened and he paled. The grave ghost mound that had been dark and shrouded in gray snow suddenly lit up as though there were 10,000 lanterns. The MO matrices and seal scripts continuously lit up at a stunning rate as though water was flowing through them. In a flash, the grave ghost mound seemed to appear illuminated as though it was day. The exquisite and complex seal scripts and MO matrices lit up in succession. The land within 50 li seemed to be covered with a bright and fine spider web. The endless bright seal scripts illuminated the curves of the landscape. The gray snowflakes floating in the air were dissonant to the beauty below, but no one could ignore them. Yet at this time, no one was attracted by the beauty of the grave ghost mound. Everyone's gaze could not move away from the godly figure in the air as they unconsciously stopped breathing. Mo God's brute hand. Everyone seemed to see a great mountain crashing down from the sky. A brutal and suffocating power that smashed down as it robbed people of hope. Under the suffocating pressure of the Mo God brute hand, the beautiful grave ghost mound was like a beautiful but fragile work of art. This hand was enough to flatten all of the grave ghost mound. Among the gray snowflakes, Mo suddenly raised his head. He only just detected the approaching furious and intimidating power after he activated the Jinji. Mo had jumped in fright. This attack had given up on all technique and skill, it was just pure power. This was the first time he saw such an unique Shin technique. While most Shin techniques were simple and utilized little skill, he had never heard of such a simple and direct method. He had once seen the rhinoceros Mo God during the fight against the Xian Kong Temple Elder Corps. He had estimates of the rhinoceros Mo God's power, but his mind still wavered at the power of this hand. But in the next moment, he suddenly reacted and knew the other's intentions, the other wanted to break his Jinji. Mo's little heart immediately stopped wavering, and his expression became vicious. The gaze he threw up was one of scorn, as he spat out a disdainful sound. It was as though he was displeased that he was being challenged in his most accomplished field. Ever since GE started learning seal formation, the turtle formation defense style had never been defeated. It had great accomplishments, and you definitely hadn't lived in Sky Moon Jia before. If there were people inside the grave ghost mound, people would be shocked to find that the scene inside was completely different than what they saw outside. The seal scripts and Mo matrices on the ground were not stationary but moved as though they were alive. The light from the ground suddenly grew. Mo's eyes grew brighter, all of the humor on his face disappearing and leaving behind only focus and concentration. Floating in the air, Mo's face that was not handsome flashed with an indescribable light. Even the suffocating pressure, Mo God brute hand, that was howling down at the ground could not steal his glory at this moment. Come! He suddenly spread his arms. The light under his feet brightened. The flowing seal scripts and Mo matrices stilled. And then they seemed to have received a summons, each of them leaving the ground and floating in the air. There were 18,000 parts, and more than tens of thousands of seal scripts and Mo matrices involved. The combined seal scripts and Mo matrices that numbered in the hundreds of thousands and of various colors and shapes all flew into the sky. Looking from afar, in that moment, there were millions of dots of light above the grave ghost mound. They were bright and like a mist. The scene was so spectacular that words could only describe a tiny part of it. Some stopped and floating in the air, others continued to rise, moving up and down in a staggered fashion. The gray snowflakes did not continue to fall but floated silently. Time seemed to be frozen by this indescribable beauty. What also stopped was the sky of the grave ghost mound. King's Forbidden Firmament. Chapter 733, Battlefield. In the middle of the night, the sky above the grave ghost mound was illuminated by a deluge of light. Mo's figure with his arms spread wide seemed to be a ruler looking down at his realm. The pride and an ease in his manner spoke of absolute control was clear to all those below him in that frozen moment. Even the bright lights could not mask his grandeur. When time seemed to freeze, a blood-colored handprint was frozen soundlessly in the air. Even while it was bound motionlessly in the air, that bright red handprint would still make people feel the powerful, vicious, and brutal presence. Mo God's brute hand. No one had thought that the Mo God's brute hand, that had drew at the energies of the universe and overwhelmed the world and caused a tsunami of ferocious power was a bright red handprint no larger than their own. When the Mo matrices below lit up, the rhinoceros Mo God felt danger. Yet everything that happened next surpassed his imagination. The destructive power, the furious wave of power he had released, stopped without any delay. Seeing the Mo god's brute hand, silently stopped in the air, he even stilled. How was it possible? Even if his Mo god's brute hand was stopped, even if the Mo god's brute hand was destroyed by the other Shin technique, he would not be so surprised. But this strange stillness in front of him surpassed the bounds of his knowledge. Arms spread, Zhuomo's eyes suddenly lit up. His right arm swayed slightly as his hand swept out. He shouted clearly, "Turn." The surrounding crowds woke up as Zhuomo's voice seemed to reverberate inside their minds. The bright rain of light above the grave ghost mound slowly revolved with Zhuo Mo as the center. The seal scripts and Mo matrices floating in the air woke up and moved around. When hundreds of thousands of bright patterns moved, everyone changed expressions. Streaks of light formed and were destroyed. Even those that were skilled in Mo matrices could not identify any pattern. It was too complex. Yet at this time, no one was able to shout in time, and those that were stronger found a faintly discernible figure within the vortex of light. The chief Mo god. Even the stupidest person could guess this person's identity at this time. The chief Mo god was in a dilemma. The Jinji in front of him was eerie and strange. The seal scripts and Mo matrices around him each gave off different kinds of power. When these powers mixed together, it was like a power bog. He wasn't able to move. No matter what Shin technique he used, it would be consumed and merge with this strange power bog. Damn it! The sickle Mo matrix on the chief Mo god's face was bright and clear, showing the fury he felt at this moment. However, he was a decisive person, and knew that he could not succeed even with the help of the others. It was more important to save himself in this moment. He immediately channeled Shin power through his entire body to protect it. At this time, the surrounding Mo matrices and seal scripts suddenly spun. He felt his breathing choke off and his body was restrained. Innumerable power flows spun around him, cutting, twisting, and grinding at him. This caused the Shin power inside him to be quickly expended. No matter how he struggled, he could not break free of the restraint. Only now did he understand the true meaning of this Jinji. It used an abnormal amount of turbulent power flows to turn the entire Jinji area into a power graveyard. Any kind of power when put in this power graveyard would be broken up and assimilated. Just as though it was trying to prove his prediction, the blood-colored fingerprint that was motionless above his head quickly melted, grew smaller, and then disappeared. Which monster thought of such a monstrous method? The fury in the chief Mo god's eyes disappeared and a thread of terror replaced it. He knew the true meaning of the Jinji, but he still did not know how Xiao Mo Gu controlled the astounding number of power flows. The pressure of the Jinji against him grew even greater, and his Shin power was used up at an even faster rate. The chief Mo god knew that if he did not make a decision now, he would most likely be forever restrained in this freakish Jinji. Viciousness flashed through his eyes. He suddenly bit his tongue. The sickle Mo matrix on his face turned from bright red to gray-white. His full face thinned eerily. He stared viciously at Zhuo Mo and gritted out, "Xiao Mo Gu, either you will die or I will die." Before he finished, his figure slowly faded at a visible rate until he disappeared. The rhinoceros Mo god detected the chief Mo god going all in immediately. Shocked, he also reacted quickly. He knew that the mission had failed this time. Xiao Mo Gu was stronger than they had imagined. He looked with lingering fear at the youth in the middle of the bright glittering rain. A hint of relief rose. Fortunately, he had not been trapped in that fatal Jinji. Taking advantage of the other people not having recovered from the shock, he suddenly appeared behind Toyoshi Yaku and grabbed him. His left hand suddenly exploded into a bloody mist and covered the pair. When the bloody mist dissipated, the figure of the two were gone. The fighting on the ground did not affect what occurred underground. The fighting underground was similarly intense. The black gold seal soldier and the fire skeleton were fighting intensely. His strength having grown, the black gold seal soldier had the upper hand, yet the fire skeleton had the advantage of home territory and used special abilities that forced the battle into a stalemate. This displeased the black gold seal soldier. The screams and nattering of the black gold seal soldier echoed over the entire sacrificial altar. "You trash bones, ye can smell the rot coming off you. You still can't give up after being buried for so many years. Be obedient and let ye help you move on, you can earn some good karma. It is your greatest fortune to come to ye's stomach. So many beautiful beasts beg for it but cannot get it, come come come." In his eyes, the fire skeleton that possessed pure Shen power was like an extremely high-quality slab of braised ribs. Interspersed among the endless nattering was the sound of slurping and swallowing. The fire skeleton was not of low intelligence and would occasionally give out furious howls. Suddenly, the fire skeleton froze. A hand covered in purple energy passed through its forehead. All of the flames suddenly disappeared. The bones immediately lost their light. Bam! The skeleton immediately turned to bone powder and landed on the ground. The purple fire in Agui's eyes were shockingly bright now and seemed to want to emerge from her body. The death Shen power inside the fire skeleton was multiple times stronger and purer than the ghost soldier they encountered outside. The Shen power of the ghost soldier was like a thin stream, and the fire skeleton's Shen power was a raging river. The black gold seal soldier was about to cry. The braised ribs had flown away. "Ahahaha! All of you come, ye wants you to come out." The grieving black gold seal soldier shouted as he charged to the highest level of the sacrificial altar. Snap snap snap. The other three status immediately shattered. 3 monsters appeared in front of him. One was a monster with a sheep head, one had a bull head, and one with a hawk head. The black gold seal soldier wasn't afraid. His eyes bright as he shouted, "Mine, mine, all mine." Hearing this, Mo, who had just arrived at the entrance, almost tripped. He sweated inside. Why does this sound slightly like GE? Having eliminated the threat of the Mo Shen temple, Mo's mind relaxed. He was confident in the power of the King's Forbidden Firmament. Only just now had he found that Agui was missing, his face paled, and then hurriedly came in search of her. Seeing Agui safe and unharmed, a rock in his mind landed. When his gaze turned towards the highest level of the sacrificial altar, his body shook, and his eyes gave off light. The shadow of the fight that had occurred a few days ago faded from people's memories. One side of the fight had been proven to be Kunlun's sword Xiu, and had cultivations near Fanshu level. This new cast a shadow over this peaceful city. Kunlun. Even in the Mo territories, all knew of them. No matter how the Mo disliked Kunlun, they could not refute its great power. In these chaotic times, Kunlun had become even more powerful, unlike Xian Kong Temple who had collapsed, and Shi Xian who was declining, and Kunlun's name caused even more fear in their enemies. Lin Qian had astounding talent and was an outstanding successor. The sect's inner circle was unusually close-knit. When compared to other sects, this made Kunlun even more terrifying. Even the Mo that were far from the front lines had expressions of anxiety and fear when they discussed Kunlun. Yet there were many pieces of popular news recently that attracted people's attention. The Mo Shen Temple had been defeated at the Grave Ghost Mound. This was the hottest topic of the moment. The Mo Shen Temple had once been thought of one of the factions most likely to unite all of the Mo. However, no one paid attention to the losers. All of the Mo territories were discussing one name, Xiao Mo Gu. Xiao Yunhai was Xiao Mo Gu. Even though the major factions had remained silent on this topic in an unspoken agreement, the angry shout of the chief Mo god had informed everyone when he retreated. If Xiao Mo Gu in the past was thought of one of the strongest in the younger generation and an upcoming talent, then no one thought that now. No one paid any more attention to the fight that had occurred a few days ago. But what no one knew was that there was a great battle occurring deep underground outside the city. 30 li under the ground, there was a cocoon of blood about the height of a person. Blood seeped out from the god-killing blood sword and flowed towards the blood cocoon. It flowed along the passages of the blood cocoon and entered Wei Xing's body. Wei Xing's own blood flowed out through another passage and permeated the god-killing blood sword. There wasn't even one drop of Wei Xing's own blood in his body. Every droplet of blood was replaced by the blood of the warriors and great fighters that the god-killing blood sword had drank as it had killed them. Through the ages, it had drank the blood of countless warriors. The blood was truly the blood of heroes. It contained the power, belief, and hate of these warriors before death, and also pure and stunning power. Each droplet was like a great poison. If this was any other person, each and every droplet would be fatal. These warriors' belief were so strong that any normal soul would be rendered into dust. In the end, there would only be one result, the destruction of the body. Wei Xing did not die even though all of his blood had been exchanged for this poisonous hero's blood. Because he was Wei Xing. His power might not be strong enough, but his resolve was not lacking compared to any other person. His body became a battlefield where intense fighting was occurring on every inch, a battlefield where he would either win or die. Chapter 734, Ancient Shen Device. Sui Mo was quick. Just having gained comprehension of a new attack in the King's Forbidden Firmament, Sui Mo attacked with a killing move. A golden light suddenly appeared on his hand. He slightly reached out and pushed at the cow-head monster. A golden handprint left his hand. If the rhinoceros Mo god saw this handprint, he would be so stunned his eyes would bulge out in surprise. Other than being made out of gold-colored light and not blood-colored light, it was the exact same as his Mo god's brute hand. No matter if it was the chief Mo god or the rhinoceros Mo god, they would not expect that the core and the strongest part of the King's Forbidden Firmament was not the restraining aspect but the king. Inside the Jinji, Sui Mo was the king of all. He was the strongest and the central part of the Jinji. All the changes of the Jinji, every minuscule change or minute action would pass into his mind. Sui Mo had a general understanding of the restrained Mo god brute hand. His attack was at least 80% similar. However, he cultivated the Sun Shen power and what left his hand was a golden handprint. The vicious presence was lesser, but a strong and fierce presence was greater. The Yin energy underground was astoundingly thick, and Sui Mo's Sun Shen power was both yang and strong. With this attack, it was like hot water in snow. A hint of fear flashed through the eyes of the bull-headed monster. The terrifying power contained in the little golden handprint made him feel great shock. He retreated. But a purple hand suddenly penetrated through his head. Sui Mo and Agui were in perfect coordination. Sui Mo's attack was astounding and thunderous to shock the other's mind. Agui was ghostly, and her one-hit one-kill preference for attacking vital areas was perfectly suited to coordinate with Sui Mo. Just like the previous bull-headed monster, Sui Mo and Agui finished the hawk-headed monster with a combo of gold and purple energy. After absorbing the Shen power of the two monsters, the brutal purple energy in Agui's eyes gradually dimmed, but a faint mark appeared on her forehead. Sui Mo's mind moved. Was this the undying Shen seal? Thinking of the old man's words, Sui Mo hurriedly took out the scab fragrance. Agui seemed to smell the scent of the scab fragrance. And a hint of desire appeared in her eyes. Sui Mo handed the scab fragrance to Agui. Each scab fragrance was about the size of a bean, each a different shape, and gray-white in color. When it was taken out, the entire place was filled with its fragrance. This was an unique and indescribable fragrance. Even Sui Mo couldn't help but swallow. The black gold seal soldier stretched out his neck and stared at the scab fragrance in Agui's hand. He appeared as though he forgot about the sheep-headed monster in front of him, and it was possible to see drool glittering at the corner of his mouth. The sheep-headed monster also stopped and stared at the scab fragrance in Agui's hand. Agui directly swallowed the scab fragrance. The black gold seal soldier wailed grievously with a pained expression. He turned and stared hatefully at the sheep-headed monster as he blasted out, "Mine, mine, mine, mine." Not having recovered from the distraction, the sheep-headed monster was beaten down by the black gold seal soldier. Suemo watched for a while. He felt that the black gold seal soldier didn't need any help, so he moved his gaze away. After Ague swallowed the scab fragrance, she immediately sat down in lotus position, and her body occasionally flashed with purple light. Agui's expression was calm, and Zuomo's worries eased slightly. His gaze once again focused on the bone armor on the platform. With a flash, he appeared above the bone armor. Examining it up from close, he increasingly felt the extraordinary nature of the bone armor. This sacrificial altar was located at a special place. There was the mouth to a yin vein under the sacrificial altar. Even normal bone armor would be completely transformed after being immersed in yin energy for tens of thousands of years like this, and become outstanding. The material of this armor itself was extraordinary, even though Zuomo could not recognize what kind of bone it was made from. The sacrificial altar was a product of the ancient era, and it was at least 10,000 years old. According to the golden leaf, the grade of a sacrificial altar was related to its size, but it was not an absolute rule. Many unique tribal sacrificial altars would not pursue grandness and vastness. However, there was one point that was always true: the guardian statues. A sacrificial altar that had guardian statues meant that this altar was extremely important to its tribe. The ancient era was too far removed from the present, and Zuomo's knowledge of the time mostly came from the gold leaf and the memories that Qin Lin had left him. The gold leaf was cryptic, and many of Qin Ling's memories had become blurred through the passage of thousands of years. The materials of the ancient era were very different from the present. That was the era where wasteland beasts rampaged, and rare materials littered the ground. This material that was able to remain until the present would be even more extraordinary. Each bone was like a gray crystal, clear and glowing. This yin vein was clearly enormous, and the amount of yin energy it contained was stunning. The sprouting yin energy was a flow that continuously washed the bone armor. Zuomo was slightly unused to the dense yin energy. Unlike the other objects of that time, the bone armor's design was unusually fine. The small bone pieces were ground thin, and layered together like feathers. What was most attention-grabbing was the two short daggers inserted at the arms. Unlike the crystal-like texture of the other bone pieces, the short bone knives were completely snowy white without any flaw. Even Zuomo felt a chill staring at the strange and eerie curves. Zuomo reached out to the bone armor. Just as he was about to touch the armor, there was a whoosh, and a great pain came from his fingertip. Zuomo's eyes widened and his expression was shocked. He put his finger in front of his eyes. There was an extremely thin wound at the tip of his finger. Zuomo's shock increased. He knew just how strong his current body was. Even normal flying swords would shatter if they stuck him, and they wouldn't even manage to wound him. It was an energy blade made from yin energy. Yet what shocked Zuomo was not the yin energy blade, but he realized why the bone armor was placed at the sacrificial altar. It was a Shin device. This was a Shin device left behind from the ancient era. This was a true Shin device. Zuomo could not suppress the joy on his face. He actually had managed to encounter such a fortuitous matter. The bone armor was pure yin in quality and not suited to him, but very suited to Ague. The undying Shin power that Ague had was a kind of death energy. The bone armor also contained death energy, and the two were a match for each other. Having woken up, Ague silently appeared next to Zuomo, her eyes focused on the bone armor. Zuomo felt her move and turned around. The mark on Agui's forehead had become clearer. It was a knotted mark. The faint purple chains formed an unique knot. Ague seemed to have become prettier. Zuomo stilled and examined her seriously. Upon close inspection, it was as he had thought. The marks on Agui's face were almost gone, and the new skin on her face was fine and white. She had a delicate and gentle face with a pointed chin. Xuemo could see the young female that was restrained in the voice. Instinctively, Xuemo reached out towards Agui's face. Agui stood motionless and did not avoid his hand. A strange and fine feeling came from his fingertips. Xuemo's heart jumped. Agui's face suddenly leaned towards Xuemo's hand, and she buried her face in Xuemo's hand. Xuemo's heart beat even faster, but he didn't bear to pull his hand away. Compared to the stopping of time by the king's forbidden firmament, time really did stop in this moment. Ha! This taste. This is the taste. It is wonderful. The laughter of the black gold seal soldier came over. He had just killed the sheep-headed monster and sucked in its shin power. Xuemo was startled and pulled his hand away. His face immediately burned red. He hurriedly dropped his hand, grabbed Agui's hand and pretended to inspect her. However, he quickly stopped pretending. Xuemo's expression became serious. Compared to previously, Agui's shin power was multiple times stronger. The vastness of the shin power caused Xuemo's heart to beat rapidly. Fortunately, the shin power inside Agui's body seemed to recognize Xuemo and did not try to hinder his son's shin power, happily welcoming him instead. Yet Xuemo's expression became even more serious. The purple chains that restrained Agui had become thinner, but the patterns on the chains became even more dense and fine. There were purple flames that would occasionally rise from the chains. The stronger undying shin power restrained Agui's soul even more. However, what eased Xuemo's worries slightly was that Agui's soul seemed to have become much more solid. The nether reincarnation lotus and the scab fragrance had helped her greatly. The young female dressed in white robes had a calm expression, and there was a similar purple knotted mark on her forehead. This time, Agui's soul did not detect Xuemo. Yet when his gaze saw the slightly bashful smile on the white-robed Agui's face, Xuemo's heart jumped strangely. At this time, his brows suddenly moved. Ian had come. On the other side of the line of fire, Ian had never felt like this. Behind him, countless gazes focused on him. He felt as though there was a blade pointed at his back, but right now, he had to persist. He had seen the Mo Shin temple being rebuffed. The last bit of hope he felt dissipated. Ian did not fear powers such as the Mo Weapon Master Association, however, the rare artifact hall wouldn't have a chance against a titan like the Yao Council of Elder. The only chance was grab onto Xiao Yunhai. Oh no, it was Xiao Mo Gu. These two names meant two completely different things. Xiao Yunhai was a Mo Weapon Grandmaster, and represented profit. Xiao Mo Gu was a Shin power expert, a warlord, and represented survival. No matter when, survival was far more valuable than profit. Ian was a businessperson. He knew that he had to prove his own value for the other to accept him, prove the value of rare artifact hall. Qian now was at odds with the Yao Council of Elders because of Xiao Mo Gu, but if the Xiao Mo Gu didn't want to cause trouble with the Yao Council, he could always ignore their plight. Right now, the only thing that Xiao Mo Gu would pay attention to was the reverse shadow soul silkgrass. Xiao Mo Gu was willing to use Earth Mo weapons to trade for reverse shadow soul silkgrass. This was enough to show the importance that Xiao Mo Gu placed on the reverse shadow soul silkgrass. He stood silently outside the line of fire and waited for Xiao Mo Gu's summons. Expressing himself like this under the eyes of everyone meant that he left himself no other paths to take. The unfriendly gazes of the Yao Council elders behind him caused him to grit his teeth and persist. Yet he had stood for so long outside the line of fire and the Yao elders hadn't done a thing. This was enough to show how wary they were of Xiao Mo Gu. This increased Ian's confidence. However, more of his confidence was in the contents of the box in his hand. Chapter 735, Kunluan's spirit. A perfect body slowly floated up from the medicine pool. On the tall figure, every muscle was clearly defined and balanced. The eyes on the handsome face were lightly closed. As his eyelids slowly opened, they revealed eyes that were deep like the vast stars, and would cause people to get lost in. He sat up, and the water droplets on his body were like the dew on the lily pads, rolling off. He was flawless, a work of the heavens. All of the elders had satisfied expressions. "How do you feel?" the snowy-haired sect leader asked. Lin Qian could hear the concern in the sect leader's words. He did not immediately answer. He tried to move his body, and his expression was slightly puzzled. The sect leader saw this and unhesitatingly said, "To the sword testing field." Sword testing field. When Lin Qian effortlessly cut a sword testing stone with a single blow as thought it was tofu, all of the elders inhaled sharply. The sword testing stone was one of the hardest stones in the world. This sword testing stone was Kunlun's largest piece and was over a zhang tall. Even the sect leader, using all his Ling power, would be unable to cut this sword testing stone into two. Lin Qian did not notice the expressions of the elders. He was immersed in a wondrous state. This slightly unfamiliar body contained astounding power. As he moved, Shen power would naturally flow, and it moved to his thoughts. He tried to merge sword essence into it. There was no obstruction, and its power skyrocketed. Yet the flying sword in his hand could not tolerate the great Shen power, melting into liquid metal that dripped down. This caused Lin Qian to show a surprised expression. The flying sword in his hand was one of the famed swords of Kunlun, called Heaven's Death. It was 7th grade, and he hadn't thought it would be unable to tolerate Shen power. All of the elders frowned. Shen power was powerful, but if even 7th grade flying swords could not withstand it, then it was slightly troublesome. "It seems that we need to carry out our journeys to the ancient ruins earlier," an elder said gravely. "Yes, a 7th grade flying sword actually melted. It is most likely that even an 8th grade sword would be unable to express the power of Shen power," another elder said with a sigh. "It would be great if we had the angel device raiment. I don't know how powerful the two of them combined would be. Why should we sacrifice what is near for what is far? There are so many ruins, there definitely would be 1 or 2 Shen devices. It is just that we did not pay such attention to them in the past." The sect leader's gaze was thoughtful. He suddenly said, "Elder Ming, you try." "All right." An elder with snowy white hair nodded. He went in front of the bisected sword testing stone. He channeled his Shen power and made a slice. The sword went halfway into the stone. All of the elders were intelligent and immediately showed thoughtful expressions. "As I expected." The sect leader's authoritative eyes flashed as he said gravely, "If one is in Fanshu and starts to cultivate Shen power, their power will increase, but it will be much weaker compared to those who are not in Fanshu." Elder Ming's expression turned stern upon hearing this. He closed his eyes and thought for a while. The sect leader is right. After entering Fanshu, one can communicate with the world and be one with them. It is hard to change paths, and the increase in power is limited. He looked at the flying sword in his hand and his expression was slightly dim. The flying sword in his hand was also 7th grade, yet it was unharmed. It could be seen from this that his Shen power was much weaker than Lin Qian's Shen power. "Is it better to cultivate this Shen power as early as possible?" an elder couldn't resist saying. "Lin Qian, say what you think," the sect leader suddenly said. Lin Qian thought for a moment before slowly speaking, "This disciple does not feel that. Our Shen power is actually too different from the Shen power of the ancient ear. Our Shen power comes from Ling power, and it is possible to see it as a new power with Ling power and sword essence as the foundation. It is its own system. Ling power is the foundation. Before Jindan, Ling power will be unstable. After entering Fanshu, it will be completed. This disciple thinks that it should be the disciples that are in Jindan and Yuanying that study Shen power first. It is likely that those at the peak of Yuanying will be affected. However, we will only know the result after trying. This is reasonable. All of the elders nodded. Each of them was profound in cultivation and had a deeper understanding of cultivation than Lin Qian. After Lin Qian pointed this out, each of them realized it. Many elders had dim expressions. Those that were able to become elders were either Fanshu, or pseudo-Fanshu that were at the peak of Yuanying. The Shen power they cultivated could not transform as purely as the young disciples. It meant that their potential in Shen power was fated to be limited. They had never thought that the cultivation they had worked so hard for became the obstacle in stopping them from progressing. The mood became slightly low. Lin Qian, the sect leader, suddenly spoke. This disciple is listening. Lin Qian hurriedly went forward and acknowledged. You comprehended Shen power. While the other Shishu have helped you perfect it, you cannot slack off. You need to study it every day. Starting from today, you are the pavilion master of Sword Pavilion, and can form the Sword Pavilion. Lin Qian's body shook. The entire place was silent. All of the elders couldn't help but show surprise. The Sword Pavilion was an unique existence in Kunlun. Every pavilion master of Sword Pavilion was the next sect leader. He needed to create his own Sword Pavilion. Including the pavilion master, there would be 9 members of the Sword Pavilion. These would be his support after he ascended to the role of sect leader. The positions of the Sword Pavilion were left vacant most of the time and would only be activated when the sect leader thought that there was a need for a clear successor. Almost everyone knew that the next sect leader of Kunlun was Lin Qian, but no one had expected that the day would come so soon. The sect leader's cultivation was unfathomably deep, his authority great, and he was trusted widely. Elders, are there any objections? The sect leader looked around at the elders. No objections. No objections. All of the elders had solemn expressions and the same attitude. Everyone knew that Lin Qian becoming the Sword Pavilion Master was the hope of all and could not be stopped. This disciple will not fail, Master. Lin Qian did not refuse. His expression became calm again without any excitement. However, the sect leader heard the determination in his voice, and a hint of comfort flashed through his eyes. The sect leader's expression was authoritative, his eyes so bright people could not look directly at him. His snowy white hair moved despite the lack of wind, his voice as strong as the sword. The old balance has been broken, the new era has started. The future of our Kunlun is the hands in youths like them. If they can grasp victory in this chaotic world, Kunlun will win. We will not use the lives of the disciples to conquer those ancient ruins, every disciple is the hope of Kunlun. It is time for us old people to create paths for them. Everyone, our light is about to dim, our era has passed, the only thing we can do now is to use our still sharp swords, use our remaining light, our remaining life to increase the probability of success of their future. The wind blew past. Above the sword testing field, the sect leader's voice echoed. Every elder listened with concentration. They instinctively straightened, a holy and excited expression on their faces. Their low spirits due to not being able to advance their Shen power disappeared. We are Kunlun, this is our responsibility, this is our destiny. We are bound by duty. If this new era demands there be sacrifices, it should be us, the old people. Starting from today, all materials for the body cultivation pool, and for core formation will not be provided to elders and the sect leader. We have found clues to 7 ancient ruins. 3 elders will explore each ruin. My sword should move once again. All the remaining elders will go to the front lines to replace all disciples Jindan and above. All Jindan disciples are to be summoned back to the sect to cultivate Shen power. We need to find those that are talented among them and groom them. We will trade our lives for the time they need to grow. When they have grown up, Kunlun's future will be bright. The authoritative voice was filled with focused presence. Everyone, please. For Kunlun, the sect leader bowed, his own brows and hair touching the ground. All the elders had stern yet heated expressions. They all bowed with great respect, and hard to suppress excitement. They shouted together, "We will abide by sect leader's orders." For Kunlun. Lin Qian's nose felt sore, his eyes blurring. He hurriedly bowed his head, both his hands unconsciously balling into fists. For Kunlun. Xu Long had a tired expression. At his side, the hardship guards were lying askew as they slept. The camp was silent and there was only the sound was the rising and fall of breaths. With the hardship guards' strong bodies, a scene like this would only occur when they were completely exhausted. He raised his head to look at the sky that was gradually growing brighter. The ruins and rubble around them indicated that an intense fight had just occurred here. The traveling speed of guard camp had always been a problem. Even though Golden Crow Camp thought of all the ways they could and used all kinds of talismans on them, the effects were not great. They cultivated MO skills, and were not skilled in using talismans. In the end, it was the Ling beasts that Chun Yicheng Darren raised that had solved this problem. However, they were still lacking compared to Vermilion Bird Camp. Therefore, the mission that Gong Sun Cha had given him was to protect the flank, an important resource Jia, San Jia. It had not taken much effort to conquer San Jia. At this time, Xian Kong Temple did not have much power left to defend San Jia. However, many factions desired the resource-rich San Jia. Up until now, Xu Long had led guard camp in defeating 8 battalions from different powers. After the successive hard-fought battles, even the determined guard camp felt deathly exhausted. Suddenly, a paper crane flew over and landed in Xu Long's hand. Xu Long became alert. When he opened the paper crane, an expression of joy came onto his face. The people from Golden Crow Camp were finally arriving. Soon, every soldier in guard camp was woken up. Large numbers of scouts and patrols were sent out to prevent small groups of enemies from penetrating their defensive line and harming Golden Crow Camp. Soon after, a vast fleet of boats appeared. Numerous black dots appeared on the horizon, each dot a treasure ship. As the treasure ship fleet neared, it was possible to hear the urgent shouts and howls coming from the sound-amplifying seal formation. It was extremely hectic on board the treasure ships. Quick, quick, quick. Prepare the material boxes. Prepare to unload the ship. Each time, remain organized, be quick. Everyone pay attention, if any one of you dares to make a mistake, don't blame me for being impolite. Find the marked sites, set up the main seal formation, we have to finish before evening. Just as the fleet stopped, a numerous crowd and innumerable boxes burst out of each treasure ship like numerous floods. The hardship guards on the ground felt the sky darken. In a flash, it was as if the sky and the rising sun's light was blocked out. Chapter 736, Won't Forget Even in Death. Swayamo opened the box and was slightly surprised. Why are there 5 reverse shadow soul silkgrasses? Ian said carefully and respectfully, the 2 extra are a gift, rare artifacts. Hall hopes to receive Darren's protection. Protection? Swayamo immediately reacted and said after a moment of thought. You do not have to do this, Qian killed the Yao elder to help me, I will not stand by and ignore the consequences. Ian grimaced. There naturally will not be any problems while Darren is here. If Darren leaves, then Rare Artifact Hall will immediately face a calamity. Swayamo thought and found that Ian's analysis was correct. The Yao Council of Elders was a great power. If they wanted to do something from the shadows, then Rare Artifact Hall would be unable to stop them. He would also not stay for a long time at Buzhou City. You may say what you think, Swayamo asked. Ian said in a respectful voice that was filled with confidence. Darren must deal with many great matters, and does not have the time for minor matters. While Rare Artifact Hall is not one of the biggest businesses in the MO territories, we have a stable foundation. We can become Darren's hand in gathering is distributing materials, transporting resources and selling items. Suemo was truly surprised now. He hadn't thought that EAN's plan was to fully submit to him. Deeply established family businesses like Rare Artifacts Hall were factions in their own right and would not easily submit to other factions. I will agree this to this. Suemo thought and then said, but you need to think it though. Once you pick a side, you will not be as idle and free as you are now. EAN's expression was joyful as he unhesitatingly bowed. This subordinate has thought this though, and this is not an impulse. Suemo was very satisfied. EAN's Rare Artifacts Hall was an unexpected haul. No matter if it was EAN's great experience in managing a business, or Rare Artifacts Hall's enormous mercantile network, they were all things that the present Mo Cloud Sea desperately needed now. This was free food dropping down from the sky. Do not spread the news right now. Suemo paused and thought. Ian immediately understood. Yes. Suemo said, it is too dangerous outside. Stay here now, and prepare an auction for the Angel Device Raiment. Darren is planning to sell the Angel Device Raiment. Ian was stunned. Yes, sell it, it is just a pseudoshin device. Suemo nodded and did not expand further. He said casually, just some simple preparations. Finishing, he disappeared. He left behind a shocked Ian. Only now did Ian realize why even the Yao Council of Elders had come to participate in this event. Pseudoshin device, the Angel Device Raiment, was a pseudoshin device. Ian had never seen a Shin device and could not make a professional evaluation, but just the name was enough to make countless people crazy. Just a pseudoshin device. Darren was probably the only one that dared to say it like that. The shock on EAN's face turned into a grimace. Staring at the 5 reverse shadow soul silkgrasses in the box. Suemo couldn't help but become excited. For this he had almost traversed through the greater portion of 100 Savage Realm. In order to not be disturbed, Suemo came to the underground sacrificial altar. Ague and the black gold seal solder were both standing guard underground. The Yin energy was of benefit to Ague, and the black gold seal soldier liked Yin energy. He copied the bone armor, swallowing Yin energy and then spitting it out. He played about happily. Staring at the reverse shadow soul silkgrasses in the box, for some reason, Suemo's heartbeat suddenly sped up. Strangely, he was slightly nervous. Those riddles that circled his mind, the voice that repeatedly appeared in his dreams, they would all be answered soon. His birth, his previous memories. Suemo stared dazedly at the reverse shadow soul silkgrass. He didn't move at all. A moment later, his body trembled. His dazed eyes finally recovered a thread of clarity. His practiced wooden face became alive and his eyes focused. He exhaled deeply and turned to look at Ague, who was stand guard silently. For some reason, the bewilderment and nervousness he felt immediately disappeared. He laughed mockingly at his own weakness. Determination and bravery returned to his eyes. He threw a reverse shadow soul silkgrass into his mouth. Something seemed to explode in his mind. Countless streaks of light and sound came at him from all directions. Boom! Suemo's mind was completely bland and he was in a daze. There seemed to be countless people speaking at his ear. He couldn't make out what they were saying. Countless scenes flashed across his eyes, but he could not see anything clearly. Too much information suddenly sprouted out of his memories and surrounded him. Even with such a strong consciousness, Suemo could not tolerate so many scenes and voices. The blurry scenes and the noisy sounds seemed to drift far away. Suemo's world became calm again. Hiding in a corner filled with rubble, a boy trembled. We definitely have to get it. On the other side of the damaged wall, the boy could hear the viciousness in the man's voice. Really? A woman's light laugh sounded. Kuan Luan is really Kuan Luan, this present, TSK, different from everyone else. However, before the old woman died, why didn't I hear Kunlun act so domineering? Humph. Go to the side, I feel irritated when I see your Xian Kong temple's falseness, the man said disdainfully. You really wound me, I want to ally with you. If that thing ends up in the hands of Tian Huan and Shi Xian. The woman pretended to be wounded and said. No need, the man said proudly, we, Kunlun, never need to ally with anyone. Don't waste effort, it cannot be used, the Jinji cannot be opened. Motherfucker, we spent so much energy to get this pile of scrap metal. They may have detected something. However, they would not bear for it to become scrap metal, they would definitely have something else up their sleeve. Did someone manage to escape? There seems to be one child that we have not found. Dumbass. How can such a mistake happen? He is trash. He doesn't like cultivating, and I heard that the old woman did not like him. Who is he to the old woman? The old woman's grandson. You idiot. Go find him. No matter what, find him. I want to see him alive or dead. In a dark and damp secret room, the small boy looked with intoxication at the mysterious patterns in front of him. For some reason he felt strangely close to these mysterious patterns. Especially those from the many jade scrolls, these would cause him to feel intimacy and warmth. Who let you in? A cold and shrill voice suddenly came from behind him. The young boy's hand shook and the jade scroll dropped to the ground. He turned around. An old woman with an icy expression was looking at him expressionlessly. I. The young boy's face was ashen white. Speak. The old woman shouted harshly. I solved the Jinji. Terror filled the young boy's mind and he stammered. The old woman was silent. You like these things very much. A moment later, the old woman suddenly spoke. Her expression was still cold but for some reason, she did not seem to be as intimidating as before. Yes. The young boy's terror decreased greatly as he bowed his head and spoke. The old woman's gaze was piercing and the young boy didn't dare to raise his head. These are the things that your father left you. I do not agree, but you have still found your way in. Starting from today, this place belongs to you. The old woman finished speaking expressionlessly and turned to leave. Starting today, she is your ghost. There was a young girl with a timid expression dressed in white robes standing next to the old woman. What is a ghost? The little boy asked fearfully. A person to protect you. The old woman was expressionlessly. A person to protect me? The young boy didn't seem to understand. Why does she have to protect me? Because I will die, the old woman said coldly. Goe, this name is not pleasing to hear, the young boy muttered. His hands didn't slow at all. The young girl tilted her head. Goe feels it is very good. How come you work so hard at such a boring thing like cultivating? The young boy was puzzled as he carefully treated the wounds on the young girl's feet. The young girl was teary due to the pain and her voice contained a sob. However, it was unusually determined. Because only when I become strong will I be able to protect young master. It is very safe here. There is no need to protect me. I don't like to go outside. The little boy's head shook like a rattledrum. What happens if that day comes? The young girl tilted her head. You are thinking too much. The little boy pretended to be an adult and tapped the young girl's head. Ah! The young girl covered her head. What is the old woman teaching you? Why are you wounded every time? The little boy said furiously, is she beating you? Don't talk about grandma like that. The young girl pushed out her cheeks in anger. Alright, I won't say anything. She doesn't like me anyways. The little boy was slightly dispirited. Grandma is very concerned about you, the little girl hurriedly comforted. No, I know, she doesn't like me, the little boy's voice was low, because she doesn't like my mother, I know. You are right. A cold voice came from behind him. The old woman was expressionless, but hate flashed across her eyes. The tree branches whipped painfully against his face, but the little boy gritted his teeth. A Gui had carried him and ran for many days, so many that he had lost count. A Gui's steps faltered. Bam! He fell off her back, hitting the ground. He became dizzy. A stream of blood spilled out the corner of a Gui's mouth. She crawled next to him and said with a sob, young master, are you hurt?" He tried to make his smile easy. "No, I'm fine. Young master, I really am useless." A Gui bit her lips, tears in her eyes. "It's young master who is useless." He reached out and rubbed a Gui's hair like usual. Gui, run." "No." A Gui shook her head stubbornly. She sighed. "They used a secret spell and left behind a mark in my consciousness. No matter how we run, we will not be able to escape." "No." A Gui stilled and then screamed heartbreakingly, her tears spilling out. He smiled and rubbed a Gui's head. "Run, Gui, and live for me as well." A Gui reached out her dirty hand and wiped away her tears. She suddenly picked him up and put him on his back and started to run frantically without a word. Gui, it is useless. Put me down," he urged many times on the road. After running for an unknown number of days, the last bit of a Gui's energy ran out. The two of them fell to the ground. A Gui's face was ashen. Her power had been used up. She struggled and crawled next to him. A Gui's face was as white as paper. She touched his face and murmured, "Young master, will you forget a Gui?" "Of course not." He smiled weakly. He was also at the end of his energy. "Young master, you definitely cannot forget a Gui." A Gui's face was suddenly covered in tears. The hot tears fell on his face. His consciousness started to fade as he murmured, "Yes, even in death, I won't forget." Chapter 737, Entering the city. He didn't know how much time had passed. Maybe it was just a moment, or it had been a very long time. When Zuoyamo opened his eyes, something seemed to silently slide down his face. Many things had been shoved into his mind, so many that he needed time to organize them. But his blurry gaze only looked at the figure that stood silently as she guarding him. His blurry vision gradually cleared as though he returned from a dream to reality. Zuomo's emotions gradually steadied. He suddenly reached out and rubbed a Gui's hair. Gazing at a Gui's wooden face, Zuomo's gaze was warm but determined. A smile spread on his lips as he said lightly, Gui, now it is young master's turn to protect you." Zuomo stood up. His presence became even deeper. Most of the memory fragments that he had recovered were sad, cold, and filled with helplessness, yet the present Zuomo was far from that gentle and helpless little boy. He had been tempered in countless battles and tests of life and death. He was the man that built the Mo Cloud Sea with his own power. The pain, sadness, and hopelessness in his memories caused him to mature even more. He would still feel terror, but he would not retreat. He would stand up straight and dare to advance even if with seas of flame or mountains of blade up ahead. He would still feel lost, but he would not lose himself to it. He would reach out his hands to explore, even if his hands would be torn bloody by the thorns in the mist. He would still be just as greedy, but he knew what was most precious and worthy of protection. He would never give up protecting, even if he needed to pay with his life. He started to understand his fate. There were still many questions. He needed to organize all of these memories. It probably would take a few more attempts to regain all of his memories. And he would have to find some of the parts he lost from a Gui. Zuomo remembered the old man said that it would be very beneficial for a Gui to consume the reverse shadow soul silkgrass. That old man definitely had a great connections with his family. However, this was not the time to take care of these matters. The riddle of his birth was unexpectedly enormous, so large that he needed time to dig. Ian was panicked. Suemo had told him to organize an auction and he had immediately started. He was familiar with doing this and the beginning had been smooth. In order to raise the status of the angel device raiment, he spread the information that the angel device raiment was a pseudo-Shin device. A weapon that was the closest to a Shin device. This immediately caused a great commotion in the MO territories. Under the unspoken agreement of the major factions, the news that the angel device raiment was a pseudo-Shin weapon had not spread. Ian broke this, and people finally realized why those major personages that rarely showed themselves were so interested in this single matter. Shin device. This was such a distant and unfamiliar term. Even if many people were not unfamiliar with Shin power now, no one had mentioned Shin devices before. No one knew what a Shin device was like. Its era was so ancient that it was difficult to find any records of it. On the other hand, all of the Sky Missouri weapons were recorded in detail. While people would not see them, they would still know something about them. The angel device raiment caused the already frenzied Buzhou city to boil over. All the factions and experts that had not intended to participate could not stop themselves. They knew even better than normal people the arrival of the Shin power era could not be stopped. At this time, the angel device raiment was peerless in value. For those experts that were laboring to explore Shin power, the angel device raiment could give them inspiration and act as an example. It would be of great help for them to comprehend Shin power. For those factions that already possessed Shin power, they hoped to reverse engineer the method to forge Shin devices through studying the angel device raiment. Shin power was great in power, and not something that talismans or MO weapons could tolerate. Shin devices would be the future direction that forging would develop in. Ian was very satisfied with the effects of his arrangements. Watching as the entire MO territories became mad due to the angel device raiment, he was filled with a sense of accomplishment. The most famed time of rare artifacts haul started from when they met Darren. Yet, as the popularity of the angel device raiment increased, and Darren was still missing, Ian's sense of panic increased. Even the Yao elders had to control themselves because there were too many experts from many factions here. It had reached a terrifying level. The Yao elders cultivated Shin power, but a martial level MO was still a threat to them. If a martial had an earth MO weapon, and if they were careless, this threat was enough to be fatal. Almost half of all the experts in the MO territories had rushed here. No matter how prideful Ming Yuyi was, she would not think that they could match this enormous gathering of experts. It was the opposite. They needed to be on their guard constantly. If someone manipulated the situation from the shadows, and these MO experts attacked them, then they would be in a dangerous situation. Even the most arrogant elder restrained themselves when they saw the increasing number of marshals around them. Yet the gathering of so many experts by itself was filled with danger. One conflict, one spar could likely cause a large-scale melee fight. The situation would become something unable to be controlled. That result was something no one could tolerate. However, Darren had not shown himself. Ian could clearly feel that the experts that had traveled a long way to be here were rapidly losing their patience. The situation was worsening, and if Darren didn't come out. Thinking about the situation that could appear, his scalp prickled. When Ian saw Suemo, he immediately became overcome with excitement. Darren. Darren. Have you arranged the auction? Suemo thought of what he had arranged before he left. Ian nodded repeatedly and reported the recent situation in detail. He also spoke of his worries. Suemo smiled and praised, "You did good, I think we will be able to sell it for a high price." Ian grimaced. Darren was still able to smile at this time. Suemo thought and then said, "If this is the case, then let's wait a while more." Wait even more. Ian's expression became even more bitter. Suemo smiled, and didn't waste words. He took out a pile of materials from his ring and started to forge right in front of E and perceptibly closed his mouth. The flames pulsed in Zhuomo's hand as though they were alive. The materials that were added to the flames continuously melted into metal liquid of various colors as they flowed. Zhuomo's gaze was calm. The blurry and fragmented shadows that flashed across his mind started to become clear. Other than Ague, what he remembered the most clearly were those jinji of different styles and types, and learning from his father's legacy. Time seemed to return to those days from many years ago. A square city the size of his palm formed in his hand. Ean's mouth was wide as he stared in shock at the city that took form in Zhuomo's hand. The little city was exquisite. The buildings were connected, and there were small copper bells on the towers that rose up, and it was possible to see each distinct brick on the city wall. This is as close I can get. Zhuomo sighed with a thread of regret in his eyes. He had created this based on his memories of the place he had lived in during his childhood. From the jade scrolls that his father had left him, he had learned that his father had built the city. He had not understood when he was small, but when he thought back now, he found to his shock that the jinji, seal scripts, and content of his father's jade scrolls were profound and hard to understand even now. His father's jade scroll had every jinji in the city labeled clearly. That was one of the pastimes of his childhood. He would follow his father's markings and find secret rooms that were hidden and not known by others. Then he would break the jinji and there would be many things that his father had left behind. Those were the toys of his childhood. But even if he had gotten back the memories related to those jinji, he was still unable to forge a city that was exactly the same as that in his memory. However, this was already enough to use. Zhuomo focused his mind, and threw the city lightly into the air. The bright seal scripts that had been floating in the sky above the grave ghost mound suddenly rippled. Then they flew like moths to a flames towards the little green city in the air. The millions of bright lights flew simultaneously towards the palm-sized city. The scene was spectacular. The streaks of light were like rain, bright and glorious. The experts that had been standing outside the grave ghost mound were disturbed and numerous people flew into the air. The palm-sized green city was like a bottomless pit that sucked in the lights in the sky. In the span of a few dozen breaths, all of the multicolored lights within 50 li vanished. Only the little city was left floating in the sky. Multicolored mist floated like a nebula round it, beautiful and mysterious. The crowd shifted. Suddenly, the city expanded at an astounding rate. This change attracted everyone's attention. Each of them stared with wide eyes in fear of missing a single detail. When the city was more than 1 li in size, and was still growing, the restless crowd started to become silent. 5 li, 10 li. A green city that was 50 li in diameter appeared in front of the crowd. The crowd was silent. They had seen talismans before, and they had seen jinji before. A city that was 50 li was only the smallest of cities. But when it appeared in front of everyone in such a spectacular fashion, people couldn't help but be amazed. The green city was shrouded in a rainbow mist that glittered prettily. It slowly descended and landed on the ground of the grave ghost mound. Astounding yin energy was continuously absorbed by the city from the underground. Water started to appear in the rivers and lakes of the city. The water that was formed from yin energy flowed as it filled the river and lakes of the city. At the central hall of the city, Zhuomo pushed open the door. Looking at the familiar yet unfamiliar scene in front of him, countless scenes flashed through his mind. An emotion hard to describe rose. He instinctively reached out to rub Agui's hair. A feeling of hardness under his hand caused him to still and turn to look at Agui. The bone armor from the underground sacrificial altar had made its way onto Agui at some unknown time. The bone armor seemed to have been made specifically for Agui. It fit her tightly and showed off her perfect stature. The bone armor that was like a layer of gray crystal covered Agui well, and added hints of mystery. Zhuomo smiled and rubbed Agui's helmet. The black gold seal soldier was hiding. He had sneaked out to fill his stomach, and he was now afraid that Zhuo Mo was going to punish him. Tseng Lianer, Qinghua Shui, and Ian gaped at the scene in front of him. The deepness in Zhuo Mo's eyes was put away. He recovered his usual smugness as his voice spread out. Everyone, welcome to the King's Forbidden City. Chapter 738, Auction. Every person that entered King's Forbidden City was filled with shock and amazement, especially since this city had appeared in such an implausible fashion in front of them. Many people's opinion of Zhuo Mo's power increased. It was not news that Xiao Mo Gu was strong, but for these experts that had their eyes on the top of their head, they were filled with confidence in themselves. Defeating a marshal might be a great matter in the eyes of the average person, but what was that to these people? They stood at the top of the Mo territories. Martial level was just the basic requirement to be on their level. Some people had even started to reach Shen power. They were more wary of Zhuo Mo's Jinji. The defeat of the Mo Shen temple proved the power of the Jinji. Otherwise, with Xiao Mo Guess power, he definitely could not have faced the two Mo gods alone and even wounded the chief Mo god. King's Forbidden City presence was stronger than the dots of light they had seen before. There were many places that people could not understand. However, most of the people had come here to see the angel device raiment, and controlled their curiosity. The old man stood in front of the city. His face was upraised as he looked at the tall green city walls with a complex expression. Ian was the first to recover from his shock. The rare artifacts hall managers that had been waiting outside hurriedly entered the palace with dishes, dried fruit, and other things to set up the auction. The auction would be occurring in the central palace in King's Forbidden City. The managers of Rare Artifact Hall were quick in their movements and the location was soon prepared. The experts that entered the auction all had wary gazes. Even the most confident person would not dare to relax when there were so many experts in the surroundings. The Yao Council elders silently stayed in a corner. What do you see? Ming Yuyi asked in a small voice. A gray-robed elder beside her had an astounded gaze. He said in a low voice, there are Mo matrices, seal scripts, and some others I do not understand, they seem to be ancient totem glyphs. Ancient totem glyphs. Feng Xinz on the other side of Ming Yuyi stilled when he heard this. Shen glyphs, the gray-robed elder explained. He lowered his voice, I hear that Tianhuan has already created a complete Shen glyph but they are on a different path, and not the original totem glyphs. Their totem glyphs here are not complete. How is their power? Ming Yuyi asked. The gray-robed elder grimaced. Very strong, maybe even stronger than we imagine. See the water in the lakes? That is composed of Yin energy. If I am not wrong, there must be a Yin vein of extremely high grade under here. He really found a good place. It seems that we will have to bleed a bit. Ming Yuyi laughed lightly and her tone was not dispirited. The surrounding elders all had matter-of-fact expressions on Ming Yuyi's confidence. In this world, there were not many factions that were richer than the Yao Council of Elders. The Council of Elders had already passed a resolution on the angel device raiment, and their order to Ming Yuyi was to pay any price. When Zhuo Mo appeared, all of the discussion immediately disappeared. Every person's gaze gathered on Zhuo Mo. Everyone, welcome. If there is anything lacking, please have forgiveness. Zhuo Mo smiled slightly and greeted the people. He ignored the wariness on their faces. In his eyes, they were all customers. Don't waste words, Yi is tight on time. Someone in the crowd muttered. Zhuo Mo smiled and said with a nod, then, skipping pleasantries, I will move directly to the main topic. His hand turned slightly, and then, suddenly, a rainbow-colored light carried a blue set of armor to slowly descend next to Zhuo Mo, angel device raiment. Sighs of shock immediately sounded inside the place. Many people couldn't help but stand up with excited expressions. In the corner, the gray-robed elder was excited and kept on exclaiming, too beautiful. It really is too beautiful. It is the work of a genius, so beautiful. Is it a pseudocian device? Ming Yuyi interrupted him to ask. She was deeply attracted to this beautiful raiment. Definitely. The grey-robed elder's response was certain. His gaze didn't bear to move away an inch as he murmured, I smell the presence of Shen power. Ming Yuyi did not speak, but her gaze locked onto the angel device raiment was unusually hot. Zhou Emo could feel the passion, greed, and desire in the eyes of the people. This caused little Mo Gu to be excited because it meant that the angel device raiment did not lack for buyers. This was good for increasing the price. However, Zhou Mo decided to add more fire. I believe that everyone has knowledge about the angel device raiment. I won't waste words and will demonstrate its use for everyone. There was a faint smile on Zhou Mo's face as though he was a polite gentleman. His hand was placed lightly on the angel device raiment. As he finished speaking, a blue light rapidly coiled around his hand and covered his entire body. When the light dissipated, Zhou Mo appeared in front of the crowd fully covered in the angel device raiment. The icy blue battle armor, the dark red mask. An icy killing energy suddenly filled the entire venue. Gasps immediately rang out in the crowd, many people unconsciously got on their guard. The icy blue scaled armor was covered in exquisite and complex patterns layered together beautifully. The pure white pair of wings on the back added some holiness to the presence. Suddenly, a layer of dense blue flame floated on the surface of the angel device raiment and burned silently. The flames quickly surrounded the wings on the back, and dots of blue energy started to fall. The moment the blue flames appeared, everyone's expressions changed slightly. An extremely dangerous presence was faintly detectable, but hard to capture. What shocked them even more was that Xiao Mo Gu was standing in front of them but they were unable to detect his presence. Rumble, many people unconsciously stood up and stared hard at Xiao Mo Gu in front of them. They were unable to detect Xiao Mo Gu. It was like there was no one where he was standing. Those that were in martial level were all people that had fought hundreds of times. They knew very well what it meant if one could completely hide their presence like this. Yet Xiao Mo Gu gave them even more surprises. The snowy white wings lightly trembled. His body suddenly disappeared from his spot. So fast. Many people's pupils suddenly contracted. They were unable to capture Xiao Mo Gu's figure. Such speed was astounding. Above. One person shouted, and everyone suddenly raised their heads. A blue figure stood in the sky above their heads. The two white wings were upraised, and formed a scissor shape. Zhou Mo's body curved at a strange angle like an eagle waiting to dive. The wings trembled, and Zhou Mo's figure disappeared again. Boom! When the blue figure once again appeared in people's vision, the blue flames that covered his body suddenly grew. He was like a meteor that was falling down. In a moment, the blurry figure that was shrouded in blue flames took over their vision. In that moment, their extremities felt cold, and they felt as though he was unstoppable. Shocked, some experts instinctively prepared to resist. The blue figure suddenly disappeared again. Clap clap clap, the light sound of clapping caused the people with their tense nerves to suddenly wake up. Good thing. Good thing. The old man clapped, his expression praising and intoxicated. Xiao Mo Gu had returned to his original spot. Beside his hand, the icy blue angel device raiment had resumed its original state and gave off an indescribably beauty. Everyone immediately recognized the old man. This old man had shaken the world in his fight with Yoshi Yaku. This old man of unknown origins had become one of the main targets that all the major factions paid attention to. Zhou Mo felt irritated. This damned old man ruined the mood he had worked to create. The old man's origins was a mystery. No one was able to find him, even Zhou Mo didn't see any sign of the old man in the memories he had gotten back. But from all the signs, the old man had a very close connection to his family. Refocusing, no one spoke, the venue was deathly silent. Zhuo Mo's gaze stabbed towards the old man as though he wanted to create countless holes in the damned old man. The old man met Zhuo Mo's gaze, grinning and showing his yellow and missing teeth. A moment later, there still wasn't a sound. Had his act been bad? Zhuo Mo muttered inside. He could only force himself to say, "Everyone, what do you feel?" No one spoke. Zhuo Mo was really stunned this time. Gu had worked so hard, shouldn't these people be showing hungry expressions? Why weren't they reacting at all? Deathly silence. Suddenly, someone muttered, "Name your price." "How many mabe?" "Give a number." "I'll take it." A large man stood up. "You'll take it?" "Your tone is really presumptuous." "Mabe? Is a Shin device like this something that can be bought with mabe?" Someone said sarcastically from the crowd. Another middle-aged person stood up. "I will use a jie to trade. You can pick any jie under my command." "What the good is jie, resources are the most valuable," another said coolly. "I will give 10 or veins, large ones, that produce 6th grade or above. When does Grandmaster have the time to waste on mining?" A female spoke, "I will offer 1 10th grade material, and 10 9th grade materials." This caused the place to quiet. Even Zhuo Mo was shocked by this price. This price was definitely a high one. Each 9th grade material was a great price, and it was the first time Zhuo Mo heard someone offer a 2-digit number for 9th grade materials. Even after rare artifact hall's accumulation over thousands of years, they only had 3 9th grade materials, and not even 1 10th grade. Zhuo Mo had never seen a 10th grade material. 10 grade, that was the highest grade for materials. But Zhuo Mo reacted quickly. He recalled the old man's warning and hurriedly said, "I need things that will nurture souls. Treasures of this kind will be given priority, and don't offer anything average." The female hurriedly said, "These materials are enough for Grandmaster to trade for many treasures that can nurture the soul." Zhuo Mo shook his head, his expression determined. "I have living soul lure." A person stood up with an excited expression. Many people had expressions of envy. A lot of auctions were like this, only trading and not selling. This depended on luck. This person clearly had good luck. The living soul lure was a rare treasure that could nurture the soul. Zhuo Mo continued to shake his head, "Not high grade enough." Many people inhaled in sharply. Even the living soul lure wasn't high grade enough. Ming Yuyi showed a confidence expression. Ever since Xiao Mo Gu used Mo weapons to trade for reverse shadow soul silkgrass, she guessed that Xiao Mo Gu required treasures of this kind and had prepared a few. Her gamble was right. At this time, a voice suddenly sounded, "Shi Xian's 5-element soul Dan." Ming Yuyi's expression froze on her face. Chapter 739, Someone from the past. A large man with rough features stood up. He had a dry smile and his presence spread. "Gu Yongdao." Gasps immediately ran out among the crowd. As one of the best battle generals of the present era, the reputation of Shi Xian's Tiger General Gu Yongdao was known far and wide. Many people had wary expressions, but their enmity decreased. Gu Yongdao had left Shi Xian and controlled a region. In the eyes of these people, he was just a small local power. Without the titan that was Shi Xian behind him, the resources that Gu Yongdao could muster were limited. He was not as much a threat as he had been when he had been acting as the vanguard for Shi Xian. Zhuo Mo saw Gu Yongdao and an expression of joyful surprise appeared on his face. "Brother Gu." Gu Yongdao raised his folded hands in a smile and laughed brightly. "Brother, do not blame me for not notifying you I would be coming. It really is that we have come in a hurry, and I only recently discovered that it was you, brother." It was the first time the great majority of people here saw this past Shi Xian tiger. They instantly felt that he was as the rumor said. Gu Yongdao's voice was like a bell, and his actions as fierce as that of a tiger. His presence naturally formed and caused people to unconsciously submit. Suemo said apologetically, if it isn't that this young brother needs treasures that can nurture the soul urgently, I should gift this to Brother Gu. Last time, Gu Yang Dao had and fought alongside Gongsun Cha to hold Great Peace City. Suemo remembered this favor. Hearing the sincerity in Suemo's voice, Gu Yang Dao laughed. We are brothers, there's no need to be so courteous. Old Gu is satisfied that brother is willing to sell it to me. If brother gives this to me, old Gu doesn't dare to accept it. Finishing, he raised his hand, and a jade box flew towards Suemo. Suemo took the jade box. The jade box was of extremely high grade, and was thin and transparent as cicada wings. It was possible to clearly see a 5-colored lingdan within that was the size of a longan. The 5-colored light swirled. Suemo didn't waste words. With a raise of his hand, the rainbow mist carried the angel device raiment to fly towards Gu Yang Dao. Gu Yang Dao's expression became joyed as he took it. At this time, a voice suddenly interrupted. Wait! Ming Yuyi stood out. Can Mr. Gu let go of this item? This one is Ming Yuyi. Gu Yang Dao turned around and his expression was slightly affected. So it is Elder Ming, this one has heard of you. However, sorry, this item is extremely important to old Gu. Ming Yuyi said coolly, if Brother Gu is willing to part with them, the Yao is willing to ally with Brother Gu and fully support Brother Gu. With Brother Gu's abilities, and the abilities of the Yao, I believe that you will accomplish great things. The expressions of some people present immediately changed, especially the factions that were close to Gu Yang Dao's territory. If the Yao really did ally with Gu Yang Dao, they would be the first to suffer. Gu Yang Dao only smiled upon hearing this. His weathered face carried a thread of pride and disdain. Many thanks, Miss Ming, for your good intentions. Old Gu is a rough person, but knows that while one is poor, they must not lack ambitions. I, Gu Yang Dao, will take for myself what I want. I will not sell myself to become a slave. You dare. An elder was furious upon hearing this. He leapt out and shouted as he pointed at Gu Yang Dao. A sharp ripple shot out his finger. Suemo's expression suddenly changed. He hadn't thought that the people from the Yao Council of Elders dared to commit a sneak attack under the eyes of so many people. Gu Yang Dao was a battle general and not skilled for his individual power. He would not be able to dodge such a sudden attack from a Shen power expert. Damn it! There wasn't enough time. Suemo was extremely frustrated, and his killing intent rose. The entire King's Forbidden City suddenly shook. If one was outside the palace, they would be able to see the rainbow clouds that hung over the city suddenly move. The water formed from Yin energy in the lake suddenly boiled. In this moment, Suemo decided that if something happened to Gu Yang Dao, he would have all of these Yao accompany his burial. In a flash, a person standing beside Gu Yang Dao silently appeared in front of Gu Yang Dao. The person's right hand was slightly open, 5 different kinds of light suddenly lighting up on his hands. Gold, wood, water, fire, and earth, the light seemed to ripple like water. The Yao Council elder suddenly changed expression. Before he was able to react, the sharp needle-like ripple he had just released suddenly turned and appeared a hand-width from his face. Pew! He spat out blood and fell forward. His expression was as white as paper, and his breathing weak. All of the Yao Council elders changed expression. Another elder hurriedly took out a pill and shoved it into the injured elder's mouth. Sir is? Ming Yuyi's pupils shrank slightly. Everyone finally saw the person who had acted. This was a delicate and quiet youth. He had an average expression and his present wasn't special in any way. From the start, he had silently stayed by Gu Yang Dao's side, including Suemo. Everyone had missed his existence. I am Shuang Yu. Everyone was puzzled at this unfamiliar name. It was clearly the first time they heard this name. Ming Yuyi had a thoughtful expression. Moments later, her pupils contracted again. Shuang Yu, who 8 years ago went into seclusion in the five-element universe. Oh, you even know that? Shuang Yu stilled. Many people in Shixian didn't know his name, yet the other was able to point him out immediately. Ming Yuyi was intimidated. If her memory wasn't so good, she definitely would not have remembered. Out of the talented disciples in Shixian, Shuang Yu was not outstanding, considered to be somewhere in the upper quartile. His birth was ordinary, and the sect did not pay great attention to him. The only thing that Ming Yuyi remembered about him was because he had chosen to seclude himself in the five-element universe. The five-element universe was a place that almost everyone in Shixian had forgotten. It was a marvelous place that the Shixian founding ancestor had found. It was a location where an extremely small jia was beginning to form, the five elements slowly manifesting inside. The Shixian founding ancestor used great powers to seal it, and left only an entrance behind. He also said that only those that came out of the five-element universe would be the ones that had truly comprehended the true meaning of the five elements. It seemed to be a great place to gain experience. When Shixian had first been founded, many disciples chose to enter there to cultivate. Yet the reality was much crueler than they had imagined. If they could not comprehend the true meaning of the five elements, they could not come out. In history, there wasn't more than 5 disciples that had managed to come out. As Shixian gradually turned to enjoyment and luxury, the disciples forgot about the five-element universe. Shuang Yu was the only disciple that entered the five-element universe in the last 30 years, and it was only due to this that Ming Yuyi had some impression of the name. She hadn't thought that Shuang Yu had managed to come out of the five-element universe. And he had also thrown his lot in with Guliang Dao. Sharp inhales sounded in the crowd, many people had shocked expressions. They had never heard the name Shuang Yu before, but all of them knew of Shixian's five-element universe. Including Shuang Yu, there had been 5 disciples that had come out of the five-element universe. The previous 4 had all been the strongest of their era. Those that came out of the five-element universe were qualified to stand at the peak of their era. No one dared to dismiss him any longer, even if this youth appeared normal. Their gazes towards Guliang Dao became filled with wariness as well. No matter what, the upper level of Shixian would not be so stupid to push away a disciple that had survived the five-element universe. But Shuang Yu had still chosen to support Guliang Dao. Guliang Dao himself was a fierce tiger, and this was giving him a pair of wings. Sui Mo was slightly surprised. However, after he asked Pu Yao about the origins of the five-element universe, he was filled with admiration towards Shuang Yu and felt happy on Guliang Dao's behalf. Guliang Dao was a top battle general. Adding on a top expert like Shuang Yu, his power could be said to have completely transformed. Guliang Dao ignored the wary and hostile gazes of the other people. He patted Shuang Ye's shoulder and shoved the angel device raiment into Shuang Ye's hands. His movements were natural as he was doing something normal. Everyone finally realized. So the angel device raiment was for Shuang Yu. Shuang Yu stilled. Big brother. I originally planned to give it to you, but I am poor, and only had 1 lingdan that was acceptable. I was afraid that you would be disappointed if we didn't get it, so I didn't tell you beforehand. Guliang Dao explained unconcernedly. Shuang Yu felt his nose turn sour. He knew how poor Guliang Dao was. That, five-element soul Dan, was the only top-level treasure Guliang Dao had. Everyone was solemn and their gazes when they looked at Guliang Dao were filled with respect. Anyone that could do this was worth of respect. People finally understood that Guliang Dao's accomplishment had not been due to luck. Big brother. Shuang Ye's eyes turned red. Guliang Dao frowned and scolded impatiently, after so many years, why are still you such a nag? Shuang Yu had a sheepish expression as he caressed the angel device raiment in his hand. His expression was like that of a child that had received the toy of his dreams. Ming Yuyi saw this and was even more intimidated inside. She felt deeply wary at Gu Yongdao's actions, no matter if it really was sincere or an act. If this person was not a hero, he was an ambitious person. Just now, she had felt a threat of Shen power from Shuang Ye's attack, even if it had not fully taken form. With the angel device raiment in Shuang Ye's possession, Shuang Ye's power would probably advance and become completed. It was safest to kill people like Gu Yongdao who could grow to become an enemy of the Yao Council of Elders. Ming Yuyi felt murderous. Shuang Yu was strong, but if they did not care about the price, they would be able to kill him on the way. If he perfected his Shen power, he would become a great threat. In Ming Yuyi's mind, only Kunlun, Tian Huan, and the Mo Shen Temple could become enemies of the Yao Council of Elders. The declining and rotting Shi Xian was of benefit to the elders. Yet Gu Yongdao was the person most likely to inherit Shi Xian's wealth. If he inherited Shi Xian's wealth, then his strength would grow to a terrifying level. She had to eliminate a hidden and dangerous enemy like this. Her expression did not change as though nothing had happened. The wounded elder was helped up. His face was pale white as he glared poisonously at Shuang Yu. Yet Ming Yuyi forgot that there was still a person here, and this person was the true master of this place. Little girl, you wound my guests in front of GE, did you forget whose territory this is? Suo Mo's low-class tone was murderous and glacial. The temperature in the palace suddenly dropped. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.